Someone once said that even the smallest axe can cut down a tree. It's true, it's not always about ratio. Drops of water falling continuously for many years will eventually one day make a hole in the stone, and after all the effort put in, we'll know joy. If you keep knocking, the door will definitely open. This is also one of the rules of life. You can't give up. A beautiful child with snow-white hair knocks calling for her father. She knows perfectly well that her father is nearby. The main character's name is Evriel Solgren. Realizing that there was no answer, the little girl frowned. If only she were taller, she would have reached that door handle without any problem. Everything is annoying because it is unclear why it was necessary to return to such an early age. This is not what should have happened. Holding out her hand, the child asks if they can hear her voice. The Duke must open. Maybe he is just afraid, that is why he hid, but nothing terrible will happen. If the man gets out of bed, Ivry will not die in agony. She wants to survive and wants to be close to him in this wonderful estate. The Duchess was sleeping. She was dreaming 10 times and snoring with pleasure when the door opened and a rough voice asked the girl to get up. A red-haired guy appeared in the doorway with a lantern illuminating the room with a weak light. This man was none other than the crown prince of the Velroiton Empire, Tezerik Kasviter Valnerion. The man comes closer and helps the blonde to her feet. He calmly says that the girl should leave the palace immediately before it is too late. Without explaining anything, Tezerik throws a cloak over the girl's shoulders and leads her out into the street. She feels fear. It is scary to imagine what will happen next, whether the hero will throw her into the fountain or lock her in the closet again. Moving forward without stopping, the heroine suddenly understands where she will be taken. Off to the side is the prayer room of the Imperial Palace. As he enters, the redhead freezes and doesn't turn around. He will only tell you once, so it's better to keep quiet. There is a secret passage under the organ bench. After the lady enters, she must go straight ahead without turning to leave the palace before dawn. The blonde tries to remain calm, but it turns out very badly. She asks why it was necessary to leave the palace at all. If the beauty doesn't follow the instructions, she will die soon, and nothing will help her. The words sent a slight chill down her spine. 2 weeks ago, the Eastern Curtain fell. Duke Solgren was unable to stop the evil that had broken out, and the soldiers did not help him. As a result of what happened, a good part of the Northern Territory simply rotted, which meant only one thing. Rotten ones are the name given to demonic beasts that are products of darkness. They are terrible in any manifestation. When attempting to cleanse the land engulfed in darkness, a poison is released, the toxins of which kill plants and herbivores. Who eat them die, followed by predators and then humans. Evriel, without slowing down, follows the man, and along the way asks if her father is okay. As it turns out, contact with him was lost a long time ago. There should be a lot of soldiers in the north, but they weren't even sent there from the beginning. The imperial family plans to abandon the north before it's too late. After what happened, the emperor has no other option but to punish the Solgren family for failing to preserve the land. Rot is just a pretext. Ivry understands this better than anyone else. The man wants to use this opportunity to remove the Duke looming before his eyes. When the current king ascended to the throne, there was a massive purge. And of course, the only one left alive was Herwin Solgren. The reason he escaped death is obvious because he is a member of the imperial family. The families of the first emperor and the keeper of the veil, Solgren, founded Velroiton, and also swore an oath by the name of Shea, the so-called protection from the curse. The family is the emperor's honorary subjects, and no one has the right to spill each other's blood without completing the deal. There is only one condition under which one can break an oath, and that is failure to fulfill the mission as a vassal. Of course, the emperor will not miss the chance to get rid of Herwin, who is clearly in his way. The only thing the heroine does not understand is why Tezerik is helping her. The redhead calmly says that he never hated the beauty, and therefore decided to help the little girl does not understand how this is possible. Entering inside, the couple looks around. Strange sensations do not leave the body. It seems that the statue of the goddess Shea is smiling a nasty smile. An ominous voice is heard asking if the two have come simply to pray, or if there is something else going on. His Majesty smiles. The Duchess obediently came to the strange place, simply believing the words of his son, and without even thinking. Tezerik pushes the beauty away, challenging the man where he even saw his son for now. That's all he can answer. The heir shouts at his father to shut up, but he becomes even more frightened. It is obvious that the man still hasn't played enough with his doll. The young man watches as the man is enveloped in a vapor of smoke, some dark substance that does not resemble anything familiar. The Duchess is enveloped in the same thing, making it so that she has no right to move in any direction, the prince screams, but his words are dissipated. 5 years have passed since Evriel arrived at the imperial palace. After the words, the hero takes out his sword. The son seems to be losing his mind due to the fear he is experiencing. He begs for it to stop before it is too late. It's time to send the baby to the emperor's younger brother. She wants to cry because she doesn't want to die. Nothing bad has been done. In any case, the lady will not be too lonely because her father is already waiting on the other side after he was killed in the same way as her. After the blow, the beauty falls unconscious to the ground. Blood splashes around, but there is no scream because everything happened too quickly. The heroine will die. After all, she already understood that there will be no salvation, looking sadly at the goddess. Shea Evri still does not understand why she is smiling. It seems that no one feels sorry for the poor child. If Solgren had a little more strength, this would never have happened. He was just sick, so he did nothing. Her eyes open, and Evriel hears a familiar voice that makes her whole body shudder. The blonde calmly asks what the beauty forgot in his office. He can't believe that his father is alive. It's all like a dream from which he'll have to wake up any minute now. The baby starts to cry. It seems to her that she was allowed to say goodbye to a person before death. It is like a gift from fate. Solgren understands that he did something wrong, so he calmly asks if his words scared his daughter. The girl rushes to hug him, asking what she should do if he dies. This hasn't happened yet. They haven't seen each other for so long that the beauty misses him. It seems that the girl came again because of the teacher, whatever the case. But she can't behave like this. She needs to try to improve. Right now, what the lady needs most is a governess who will help with her studies and do everything as it should be. It seems that father already said something similar, but in a past life, Lady Tillian will soon arrive at the castle, and it is absolutely necessary to get along with her. The little girl remembers every word, and therefore finishes the sentence for her father. If they don't get along, then it will be difficult to find a teacher again, and a decent amount of time will have to be spent on it. The gaze turns to the Solgren deer hanging on the wall. Now there is no doubt the beauty is definitely in the estate and in the man's room. Someone enters the room immediately after the knock. The fair-haired girl apologizes for disturbing. As it turns out, she came for the mistress. When Evri was 6 years old, her maid returned to her home so that her body would not be taken over by the rot from the north. Why does it seem in my head that this is the afterlife which makes me feel uneasy? The master orders to take his daughter back to her room. The little girl is stubborn. She doesn't agree with where she's being sent because there's still something very important that needs to be checked. Lily still carries the beauty out the door. She quietly asks why Evriel ran away while she was preparing a bath for her. Belgrin calmly asks the little girl if she is upset that the teacher will be arriving soon, and she lowers her head. The Duke had a hard time hiring Madame. I have to agree, but the girl had already been through this. Calmly carrying the lady into the room, the lady asks not to worry, the teacher will surely be good. There is a snowball on the table, a toy given to Lily for her 5th birthday. The blonde can't believe it. She's being called to take a bath. It's high time, but for some reason, the beauty is trying to run away. There are too many contradictions in her head. The little girl grabs her face, looking at it in surprise, and not understanding if it's really her. The maid smiles, saying that it is the child's birthday today. She congratulates him again, holding out her hands in a gesture. Solgren screamed and struggled from incomprehension. But unfortunately, there was nothing left to do. She was sent to the bathroom. Something on her shoulder catches her eye. This scar wasn't there before the cut is exactly where she was hit. The wound must have been deep, which means it was quite painful. The heroine does not respond. The Emperor's sword was terribly painful. The little girl was scared that day, and everything swam before her eyes, as if underwater. I would like to tell the truth, but this is already a different level. I will have to explain that the beauty went back in time. No matter how much Solgren thinks, she does not understand why she returned to the past. If this is true, it is worth thinking about. When the main character turns 14, the king will destroy her entire family and the girl herself. Perhaps the child was given another chance by the goddess herself. She will be able to change the future. The lady is glowing with joy. but it fades away. She is only 5, and it is not clear what can be done at such an age. The father needs to restore power and return his former strength, in which case the story will end happily. Everything is correct and the plan is perfect, but the only problem is the father weakened by illness. The reason why their family has no support is because of Hervin's health, which is gradually deteriorating. The shining sky at the mountain peaks is called a curtain, and it is not a simple weather phenomenon, but something more. The mountain ranges contain darkness, with powerful demons sealed within them, and the veil is the only defense against these creatures. Solgrins, who failed to maintain the veil, would have to pay the penalty if anything went wrong. Perhaps the emperor himself deliberately ruined everything since it was more than beneficial to him. The little girl knows that she must never give in to helplessness. The duke must regain his former power. From this point on, the main goal is to restore health, and preferably as quickly as possible. The beauty is asked to sit down at the table to eat the food is somehow meager. Hervin probably eats exactly the same. There is little on the table, but the cook tried very hard, smiling the little girl. Thanks, Alex, so as not to offend. It's not a question of the chef's competence. The financial situation is so bad that even the food budget has to be cut. The mistress blows out the candles, and the servants clap for her, while she will simply enjoy such pleasant moments. They are special. If the holiday always falls in October, it means that it is now exactly this month. The girl tries to count. Around this time, the young lady followed Tillian to the palace, and earlier that day, her father reminded her about the teacher. Dad doesn't understand anything at all because his daughter only needs him and no one else. Under no circumstances should the teacher be allowed into the mansion, or if necessary, he should be escorted out as quickly as possible. Lily, as the mistress's nanny, will always be on her side. Nothing will change. If everything is so, the heroine promises to listen to the request, no matter what it is about the beauty smiles. The hero feels ill again and is about to call a doctor, but then a rag in cold water hits his face. A daughter appears in front of a man, and it seems to him that this is all a strange dream that he is having because of the fever. The realization quickly dawns that what is happening is quite real. Solgren greets Hervin. Lily remained outside the door, waiting to be called inside, and then she came in. Blue-eyed insists that she didn't open the door, or rather, she didn't do it on her own, without listening to anyone. The beauty merely lifted her mistress so that she could reach the door handle. The blonde used manipulation, saying that if she was not helped, she would not eat. The man orders her to take the towels and leave, but the daughter resists with all her might. Entering the room without permission is prohibited, and it seems the beauty has long since realized this. Avril had never been so capricious, but recently she had noticeably changed. In her hands was a snowball toy, which the girl had forgotten on the chair next to the bed. It turns out that Lily herself made the thing, but the baby was sad in the room, so they brought him to the Duke. A doll in the hands of an adult sounds like a real joke, which created a strange feeling. The girl again wanted to talk about the teacher, but she was again reminded that it was better not to go into the bedroom. The lady screamed and sobbed. If she didn't do just that, she would stop seeing Hervin. I always wanted a man to at least talk a little and give me his love. In fact, this outcome of events was quite expected. My father is too strict, so it seems there are few options left. The lady can't help but be upset. She was just trying to be as caring as possible. At first, the little girl wanted to talk about the teacher, but when she saw Hervin lying in bed, she couldn't even open her mouth. You can tell from his face that very soon he will get even worse or disappear completely. Lying in a dark room all alone, the guy was bored, which is why the Duchess wanted to be near. This won't do, there must definitely be a way. The beauty tells Belgren that she is going to go somewhere. The baby went to see the family doctor, Evan Chrysler, and he asked if everything was okay or not. To take good care of the Duke, you need to know every one of his illnesses well. The man looks like a charlatan. Of course, he has a medical license, but the question is in the man himself. Hundreds of women fell for the guy's tricks and then ran away from the mansion in tears. The child can examine the medications, but Evan doubts there will be anything interesting in them. The ingredients for the drink my father needs are laid out on the table. It will take about 3 days to make. Smiling, the beauty tries to liven up the conversation so that she can later ask the doctor what illness her father has. It's surprising that his daughter is interested in Hervin's condition, and it's strange that it even bothers her. The man's gaze becomes stern in just a second, and he looks at his interlocutor. Of course, all this is necessary just to find out more, and perhaps even to help. In fact, not much is known about the Duke's illness, and it is not clear what to do about it. Only Evan himself and his assistant Keon, his closest confidants, know the truth about the master's condition. Even servants are strictly forbidden to know the details because they seem completely unworthy of it. All the man says is that the guy's lungs are weakening, which is why it's much more difficult for him than for everyone else. The blonde still wants to know what she should do to help her dad get better. If she sleeps and eats, she hopes that everything will go away. In good weather, the hero would benefit from walks in the fresh air only with his daughter. The heroine's good intentions will definitely help. In any case, everything will be more than fine. Hervin's current condition is beyond the doctor's control, and he understands that there is nothing he can do. Hugging Evan, the girl thanks him and says that she is now much less worried. Lily, using only gestures, tells the brunette that she is glad that he managed to lift the little girl's spirits. In fact, the little girl is hiding her true feelings. She is afraid that Solgren has developed Cynic's disease. An incurable disease gradually reduces the heart's function for reasons unknown to humanity. There will definitely be a cure for this terrible infection, but they are only just beginning to develop it now. When the main character was 13, they finally found a way to slow down the effects of the disease. Sunlight helped, and then a year later, they developed a real cure. Evan's voice echoes in my head, talking about how the gentleman's lungs are weakening. Looking at the table, the beauty realized that there were only sleeping pills and painkillers there. Studying the herbs in the Imperial Library will be useful. It is worth thinking about what to do next. In her past life, even after the invention of the cure began, the girl could not run to her father. She felt bad about the possibility of being rejected again. Now is not the time for stupid memories. Something like that will not happen. The man will live happily and long. In order to help the baby, must quietly sneak into the room like a mouse into a hole. Lily asks. Not to worry, the Duke will definitely recover someday. The heroine heard somewhere that asking for forgiveness is easier than asking for permission. She had something in mind. The next day, a servant was ordered to throw out the curtains from the Duke's room to let in the sun. The guy always kicks them out, so this time most likely nothing will change, at least not too much. The door was locked, and the little girl jumped out, realizing that she didn't deserve this. To be heard, the beauty screams as loudly as possible, something about caring and that she wanted the best. The Duke listens to the screams. The girl had never been so stubborn, but now she decided to get out of the rut. The blonde doesn't understand whether it's worth continuing to force the child to do something she doesn't really want to do. Falling onto the bed, the hero coughs up blood. It gets worse. Every must not be allowed to get near him under any circumstances. The lady was tired of shouting. She drooped. It was unclear why the father closed himself off, as if he was really angry. Even when Hervin swears he doesn't close down, it's scary to imagine that the symptoms have worsened. And this is the real reason. The little girl's hand trembled as she tried to knock again and ask permission to come inside. The gentleman clearly needs rest. Belgreen suggests going back and even promises to bring dessert. Every will remain at the door. The most important thing is her father, not some food which is completely unimportant to her. The door opened, but on the threshold appeared none other than Rasher, who greeted Ivriel. The Mayer family, who had served the Solgrens for generations, was exiled, so the man who took the place of assistant is Keon. In words, the guy is a simple assistant, but in reality, he has taken on all the responsibilities of his sick father. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, although it seemed like the separation hadn't lasted that long. The gentleman needs rest. It's clear that the girl is bored, but today is definitely not the best day for a meeting. Making sweet eyes, the blonde asks to come in for just a second. She needs to tell him something very important. Lately, the gentleman had been sleeping little. The man deliberately closed the door to ensure peace. Since it won't work out, now the child insists on seeing it in the evening, which would also be a good option. Still Keon left and the door closed. Lily gave the little girl a strange look. This is the first time Blue Eyes has seen the two talk for so long, considering it's rushers. For some reason, it seemed that the heroine was afraid of Keon, but in fact, this man is of a different race. Outwardly, they resemble people, but the blood of the beast flows in their veins, so they are very different. The blood of a wolf flows inside such animals, which gives them many abilities in the physical and mental plane. Ordinary people often say that they feel a strange fear when they are around another race. Most likely every feared Rasher for the same reason. But for now, it was the Emperor who was most to be feared. The woman shakes her head, trying to push unimportant thoughts aside and forget. The most important thing is the arrival of Lady Telian. She is already on her way, so she will be at the mansion tomorrow morning. There is no longer any hope for leniency from the father. Everyone is for himself. The man probably won't understand, but the beauty simply has no other choice. She'll have to act on her own. Walking forward down the corridor, the mistress asks the maid to follow right behind her. The main character left because she was not allowed in by order. Kian asks if it is possible to arrange a meeting for the evening. The refusal is heard without delay. As soon as the girl is met in the corridor, it is better to turn around and leave. The hero asks not to say a word about the baby for a while. All this time, he was too rude to her. The teacher will arrive very soon, and the beauty will be given to her. Kian doesn't dare contradict or try to persuade, so he immediately agrees. Telian looks out of the carriage window. For some reason, she never thought she would ever end up in the north. Seymour was originally a servant to the Empress and lived a decent life, but something happened. Having lost her second daughter, the woman went mad, changing servants day after day like gloves. Telian, like everyone else, was thrown out. She was left on the street with nothing, and on top of all that, humiliated. To make matters worse, famine struck the county, leaving the family alone and on the brink of ruin. The girl asked her entourage for help, but no one extended a hand to her. And then one day, she met a nobleman. The man asked if the brunette wanted to give the Empress, a girl, a new child. At first, the heroine didn't even understand what was being discussed, so she had to ask again. When the queen sees the little girl, she will accept her as her own and regain her sanity, such were the assumptions. Of course, the blonde's madness arose from the deaths of her daughters. Then everything seems quite logical. The baby must be an aristocrat, so that she can calmly enter the palace and appear without creating unnecessary problems. As it turns out, Duke Solgren is just looking for a governess for his little daughter. Once the lady has gained the child's trust, she is obliged to bring her to the castle, and then Seymour will provide support. Evriel is not of the imperial family, but of the same origin. Understanding who they are talking about, the beauty wonders whether His Majesty himself will be against it. As it turned out, the Emperor himself wanted to get the baby. That was his order. Perhaps the hero wants to take the Duchess hostage and put a collar on her. To fulfill her plan, Seymour must bring the girl to the place where they want to see her. Just 20 minutes ago, the blonde was standing by the window and looking at the carriage, realizing that Telian had arrived. The woman who brought Evri as a gift to the Empress is terrible. Everyone knows about hers. When children start walking, they are immediately assigned governesses who begin their education. The Solgrens also placed an advert several times, but the family head is sick and powerless. The family was considered almost dead, so ordinary teachers did not want to get involved. When the blonde turned 4 years old, a governess was never found, and this became a problem. The servants were also very worried, but suddenly she appeared, that very savior. Telian is the one who, despite everything, agreed to teach. Bowing her head, the brunette says how pleased she is to meet him, and then smiles pleasantly. The woman was still pleasant and polite, but the little girl was longing for her father, who was ill. Over time, Hervine became worse, and after Lily left, his condition worsened completely, to the point of no return. Telian was the sole guardian, and when the Duchess turned 9, a new system was introduced. The girl noted that it was worth going to the capital, where the environment was more favorable. They pressed the issue because there were probably many doctors there who could help cure the Duke. Hervin didn't think twice and sent his daughter to the city, believing it was a great opportunity to become a better person. The father thinks that the girl is not good enough. That seems to be all that is on his mind. The little girl tried to think positively. There really are a lot of talented doctors in the capital. A plan has formed in her head. When the heroine grows up, she wants to return and help her dad. Not knowing Telian's true nature, the blonde thought that there was no need to worry, that she would help if anything happened. After her arrival, the governess's behavior changed. She screamed constantly. Then it seemed that all the words were pure truth, and everything she taught must be learned. The same thoughts remained in my head about how to help Hervin. Everything else was so unimportant. When Evri realized the teacher's intentions, it was already too late. The heroine had turned 10, and she was brought to the Empress. The Mad Queen called the blonde by the names of her daughters, doing it in a strange order. The memories make her feel creepy, and as she goes down the stairs, the little girl also greets Seymour. The brunette thought that there would be a kitten-like girl who had no knowledge of etiquette, but it turned out that this was not the case. The woman can't even imagine that she herself taught manners to the little girl, who now takes advantage of them. Smiling, Ivriel suggests that they finally begin their classes, as she had been waiting for this. Come to think of it, it was all strange from the start. An aristocrat from the capital couldn't possibly come to the north just to teach. Ultimately, in order to take the family hostage, the emperor carried out his plan. In order not to seem strange, the beauty asks, smiling, if Tillian is against it. Hesitantly, the woman agrees to start today, glad to see the desire for knowledge. The lady doesn't know anything anyway, so you can start from the basics. In the governess's head, it's easy. The dreams were shattered very soon, when it became clear that the child could do everything, even the most basic things. Digging through the materials, the brunette tries to understand how such a level of knowledge is possible. Yawning slightly, the heroine asks when classes start. She has been waiting for half an hour already. Starting to get angry, the lady promises that she will soon teach a higher level. All that remains is to wait a little. Opening the book, he asks a question about the difference between the calendars of Shea and Levankel. The smile is visible because in this case, the lady will get what she deserves. Evri is not the least bit embarrassed. The goddess's version is based on the change in brightness of the planet Muk and Levankel's on the sun. Nodding, the woman freezes. She doesn't understand. Now she's even more confused because it all seems unreal. Trying to add something, the lady quickly stumbles because the child himself knows everything perfectly well. All this is very interesting and definitely makes you smile. The blonde also wants to ask some interesting questions. I would like to know what the constellation of the Protective Cross looks like when observing the Primera group of planets. Time ran out, but no answer was given. The little girl herself told about the Greek cross. The strange thing is that the teacher doesn't even know what a little child like this girl knows. Freezing, the brunette realizes that they are speaking to her in a different language. A simple child cannot know such words. Screaming about deception, the lady wants to run away, but they shut her up. Solgren would not behave like that with someone they had been looking for so long. Seymour was told that the child had never been taught before, but this does not seem to be true. It's offensive what happened, but in the beauty's opinion, it's worth nothing. Folding her arms across her chest, the lady concludes her remark by saying that she is much smarter than the teacher. The father will probably ask how the lesson went and what new things his daughter learned. She is going to tell him the truth. Either they continue their pointless pursuits, or Tillian will return and find another way to save his family. The heroine somehow found out all the details. Now it's clear why she never had governesses. The blonde knew the purpose of her visit from the very beginning, and even prepared a plan. This is unthinkable. The Duke's assistant is now in the office where you can go. This is said only by the way. Keanu was told that the lady knows history etiquette and a foreign language. Rasher himself doesn't understand. The child doesn't really know how to speak and can't have such a broad range of knowledge. On top of all this, the Duchess threatened the woman, and she is asked to provide details. The girl fell silent. If the Duchess knew about the problems, it was not a fact that Hervin was also aware of them. It doesn't matter anymore. The lady doesn't agree to such terrible conditions, so she's getting ready to leave. The girl was afraid of the child she was supposed to teach. She was definitely incompetent and no longer needed. Kian understood everything, but since the girl was complaining about difficulties, there was nothing he could do except end the conversation. The carriage for the return to the capital will be prepared very soon. You won't have to wait. That same day, the lady escaped from the mansion, and this time it happened much faster than expected. The conversation method worked like a charm. In her past life, the lady used Ivriel because she was easy to control. Now the heroine managed to achieve her goal only thanks to her perseverance. The heroine will be able to turn everything upside down using her excellent knowledge. Smiling, the girl is getting ready to go to her father. She wants to talk. Brontes stands in the corridor outside the door, shouting that Tillian must not come back. The Solgrens have 3 powerful vassals. One of them is May, another is Vibain, and the third is Brontes. One of them is the most terrible, and this also became clear only in a past life. Those 3 were the ones who insisted on hiring a governess. They believed it was the right thing to do. The blonde didn't understand before, but now it seems strange how everything turned out. Naturally, education is an important part of the process for the successor of the Earth. The only thing that doesn't add up is that when the maiden, as the only heir, was left with the empress, no one thought about how to take her away. It was convenient for the Trinity to remove Hervin, who had lost his daughter and was very ill. There may be potential traitors among everyone, which is not good. Virgo tries to think that everyone here is like-minded, but it is difficult. Brontes is a relative of the Solgrens, from a side branch, the one who is closest. If all the heirs die, he will be the one to follow them. This realization comes unexpectedly. Kian opens the door, but the man is not allowed in because the Duke is not in the best condition. The brunette wants to come in for a moment to discuss what to do after the governess ran away. For some unknown reason, this man is overly concerned about the baby's education. It's also not worth jumping to conclusions without understanding. Emerging from the shadows, the little girl greets Rasher. Making eyes again, the little girl asks if she can come in, but the answer has not changed. Distracting from the conversation, the brunette standing nearby asks to talk. He has one question. Sitting down at the table, the young man asks if it's true that he and Tillian didn't get along, and if she was that terrible. The man got straight to the point. It seems the lady simply didn't want to teach the child and was scared. If the brunette had been treated more gently, this would not have happened. Brontes believes that it is not too late to fix everything. The girl must receive a good education and become an heir so that the master is not disappointed. The words are exactly the same as what Seymour said back then in her past life. It becomes clear that Brontes and Tillian are accomplices, which was impossible to understand at first. To deal with the Duchess, who was an eyesore, the man took a risk and called his friend. It seemed like everything would be simple, but on the very first day, the lady came running almost hysterically. After the words that the girl knew everything, the heroine simply ran away. She didn't want to get involved in any unnecessary problems. The character sat in a luxurious armchair, casually holding a pipe in his hand, his face reflecting a slight irony, as if what was happening amused him. In his thoughts, he regretfully noted that if the Duke had known, he would have immediately fired the maid. Tillian was frightened by a stupid childish joke and ran away. Now she can't help in any way. Nothing can be changed. 3 people are standing at the door. A tall man with a serious expression on his face next to him is a short boy and a man with red hair. The red-haired man is thinking hard that this situation is his best chance to get closer to the Duchess. There is a hidden purpose and determination in his gaze. The task must be completed. A little girl with large violet eyes looks up with a slight bewilderment and innocence on her face. Her white hair neatly styled in the dark thoughts of an adult, the realization hangs over her that it would not be difficult to deceive a 5-year-old child. The girl remains unaware of what is happening. A man with red hair and a stern expression stares ahead tensely. His gaze shows determination, as if he is trying to convey an obvious truth. Confidence grows within him, and he mentally exclaims that this is obvious, not allowing himself to doubt that he is right. The character's hands carefully hold the cup. The subtle aroma of tea fills the space. The question about Lady Tillian sounded unexpected. Causing confusion, Brontes confusedly answered that he did not know her nervousness was felt in every word, and the atmosphere became increasingly tense. Evriel, still holding the cup of tea, smirks surprised that the man speaks so confidently. Although he clearly does not know the girl, the hero begins to get nervous, not believing that the Duke could somehow magically figure out everything. This should not have happened under any circumstances. With her head slightly bowed, the beauty continues her game with a slight smirk. Her words sound like an innocent question, but there is a hidden mockery in them. The man understands that this is possible. She claims that she is worried about the future of the family and well-being. But the word well-being causes only a quiet inner laughter in her, because it is clear that he wishes them all death. The red-haired man stands confidently, but there is a slight tension in his gestures. He confirms that the noble blood of the Sogren family flows in his interlocutor, and that the mission of Keeper of the Veil will inevitably pass to him. But he expresses concern that his education may be inferior to that of other aristocrats. The guy with a tense expression on his face thoughtfully curses the girl, wondering when the promised day will come. His attention focused on the figure standing in front of him. The heroine, without turning around, asks the question, "Do you really think so?" Her calmness contrasting with his growing anxiety. Still sitting in the center of the room, The brunette asks a question with a hint of incomprehension. His expression remains wary. Ivriel does not rush to answer, only coldly, remarking that she will explain everything when the vassals gather. She is confident in her position, making it clear that the reason why she does not need a governess is obvious, and further explanations are unnecessary. A little girl with white hair stands next to a tall woman in a strict dress. She asks worriedly if everything will be okay. Her gaze is full of anxiety. The woman looks down at her with slight bewilderment, not understanding what exactly is being discussed. A feeling of uncertainty and anticipation hangs in the air. The maid turns to her charge, reminding her of the request to open the treasury through Lord Kian, but she notices that the Duke did not give permission for this action. The little girl, slightly turning her head, silently looks forward, hiding her emotions behind an outward calm. In her head, it is still decided, but Lily does not suspect it. A little earlier, a hero with long dark hair, slightly raising an eyebrow, looks at his interlocutor with interest, holding scrolls and papers in his hands, as if he had just interrupted his work. His question, sounding puzzled, in the silence concerns the treasury, causing a slight wariness in the interlocutor. The girl excitedly shares that she has never been to the treasury. Her curiosity growing with every word, the man with his hands folded listens to her while the maid stands nearby, watching their conversation. The girl's questions clearly aroused interest, and the atmosphere filled with anticipation. A young man frowns and utters a thoughtful, pondering his proposal. Below, a comically stylized group of characters is depicted. A girl promises that if he opens the door, she will no longer interfere with his diligent work. A maid stands nearby, smiling as she watches the scene. The atmosphere lightens, as if the tension has melted away. A little girl with sparkling violet eyes confidently declares that Kian has given them access, and now everything is fine. She reminds them of the upcoming important meeting, adding that they must not distract their father. A desire to act according to plan can be felt in her voice despite her young age. A winter silence descends upon the city. Everything is covered in a blanket of snow. After December, severe cold weather sets in and lasts for a whole month. Snowdrifts cover houses and streets, creating a feeling of deep winter peace. Whirlwinds give the city the atmosphere of a cold but calm winter, which will soon end, not on a positive note. Every year in November, an important meeting is held to prepare for the harsh winter, during which time all the vassals gather in the mansion to discuss the plan of action for the coming months. Horse-drawn carriages are lined up in front of the gates, ready to enter the courtyard as the cold wind picks up. At the meeting, an important issue is discussed: the monthly distribution of provisions and the provision of fresh water for everyone. On the street, a man with a tool in his hands encounters a wolf standing in the snow. Barrels of provisions serve as a reminder that resources are extremely important in the harsh winter. The heroine smiles enthusiastically, assuring herself that everything will be fine. Her face radiates optimism, but internally she admits that her actions now do not seem right to her, a bright smile contrasting with a slight doubt that remains deep inside. The white-haired child squints slyly, her finger raised to her chin in a thoughtful gesture. Every remarks with a slight smile that it seems a bit chilly here, violet eyes sparkling against the background, adding a playfulness to her expression that entices. She makes herself out to be a victim. The maid, worried about the cold, exclaims that she knew she should have put on a warmer coat, and promises to bring it quickly, her face reflecting slight concern, because initially she should have taken better care of the girl. Solgren remains in place, maintaining her calm, while the situation around her is handled with care. She waits for the right moment. The girl knows full well that she put on a thin coat on purpose, mentally apologizing to Lily. But her thoughts quickly switch to the task at hand. She resolutely understands that she must finish everything before the maid returns. Before it is too late, determination is visible in every movement as she quickly gets down to action. A little girl stands in a dimly lit room, her expression serious. She is thinking about the magical castle, which, as she has learned, only reacts to members of the Sogren family. Her gaze is focused. She is about to take important actions, relying on her guess. Carefully touching the magical door, her hand trembles slightly, but her confidence grows with each passing moment. Suddenly, the doors begin to open, and her face lights up with determination. She joyfully exclaims that she has succeeded, standing in front of the shining stars that symbolize her success. A shining winter branch, surrounded by light, appears before his eyes. The hero mentally notes that he hasn't seen it for a long time. The branch is a family treasure, passed down from generation to generation, to protect the veil. Its magical aura emphasizes the significance and power of this artifact, as well as the fact that it is not allowed to be used by just anyone. The magical cane glows with a cold light, shimmering with snowflakes. Solgren remembers that this item was created from a piece of the ancient spirit of winter. Another important sprout its power, and ancient origins make it even more important for protection and maintaining balance. The girl with a serious and thoughtful expression on her face recalls that the magical branch was originally supposed to belong to her father, her violet eyes reflecting deep thoughts about how everything has changed and why she now holds this responsibility in her hands despite her age. The girl sadly thinks about her father, knowing that he will not be able to withstand the icy mana emanating from the magical winter branch due to his weak health. The artifact symbolically reaches out to him, but its cold power is too great for his weakened body. It is not so easy to take possession of it. Looking thoughtfully into the distance, the beauty thinks, and then her face is momentarily illuminated with determination. She understands that she must possess the magic twig, but a bitter realization emerges in her thoughts. In her past life, her attempts failed many times. This memory adds to the heaviness of her decision. Evriel squeezes her hand, trying to overcome her doubts. Her thoughts are clear. She cannot be cowardly. She resolutely reaches out to the magic twig, firmly convinced of her goal. She is sure that she can, that she must show her abilities. The glow of the thing illuminates her determined face. The light is too bright, so much so that it becomes uncomfortable. Clutching her staff tightly in her hands, Solgren silently concentrates, raising her gaze to the heavens, asking for support from the magical relic. She mentally admits that without its power, she will not be able to protect her family and father. And this is now in the first place. Every word of hers echoes in her heart, awakening hope. The men gathered around a long wooden table discuss current affairs. One of them mentions the need to maintain the defense on the third level until the end of the cold weather. Such a decision could save many people. Another vassal, smiling, says that he recently acquired excellent swords, which he will show off next time. Another of those gathered, turning to those around him, expresses bewilderment at the fact that the Duke still trusts an assistant of another race, who on the contrary does not deserve a place in the castle. He notes that Hervin also follows the unfair orders of the imperial family, which should not even have been applied. The guy clenches his fist with obvious contempt, his face tense when all he can do is try to restrain himself. Brontes reflects on how the main one is weak and reckless, the Duke expressing his disappointment. These thoughts gnaw at him. He does not understand how such a person could get such a high position. The man expresses indignation and inner irritation, but says nothing to avoid getting into trouble. He is convinced that the Duke, whom he despises for his weakness and stupidity, has taken his place. Bitter words flash through his thoughts. If not for this man, he would have become the ruler of the North Envy, and hidden emotions drive him, not allowing him to think about the reality of the situation, and he hatches plans to seize power. The hero is confident that time will be on his side, and if he waits, the North will sooner or later fall into his hands. A white-haired character sits at a table clutching his head, obviously suffering from pain or fatigue. He tries to concentrate, but the pain prevents him from continuing, causing him to suddenly double over with a heavy sigh. He suggests moving on to the next question, but soon Kiane, standing nearby, suggests ending the discussion and postponing it until tomorrow, realizing that everything could end too badly. In the hall at a large table, the serious situation is still being discussed. One of the meeting participants notes with alarm that the head's condition has worsened again. Everyone around understands that the Solgren's family is on edge. The situation is heating up, tension hangs in the air, and everyone feels a growing crisis. A man with a determined look tells the audience to control their words. His voice sounds stern, and the atmosphere becomes tense. In the next panel, another man repeats his statement, reminding that the discussion of the remaining issues will be postponed to the next meeting. The hero in the brown suit stands confidently in front of the man sitting at the table. He leaned forward with a slight smirk on his face, and without waiting for permission, he says that he needs to discuss something before the end of the meeting. His goal is to raise the issue concerning the mistress's governess, because they need a new person to carry out the plan. The focus of the meeting is now on Brontes. Another man leaning over the table asks in surprise, "What does he mean since the governess has already been found? Unless, of course, there was a mistake, the other participants of the meeting are sitting at the table listening to him with attention, while the discussion takes a new turn concerning previous agreements." A subtle smile can be seen on his face, and the brunette informs those present that Lady Tillian returned on the very first day because she could not stand it, and he also adds that something bad clearly happened, as if enjoying the intrigue that had arisen, his gaze full of hidden malice, as if he knew in advance about the unforeseen circumstances. Brontes, his head half lowered, reflects maliciously on what is happening. A cunning light flickers in his eyes. He is sure that as soon as the vassals find out that the governess ran away on her first day of work, their trust in the Duchess will disappear. His secret pleasure at the coming consequences is clearly evident on his face. Everyone remembered the Duchess as she was last year, uncertain and constrained. She barely knew how to say hello, had no knowledge of etiquette, and tried to run away from the crowd of people. Every step she took was tense and awkward. But now, seeing her, those around her could not help but notice the change. But the past still cast a shadow on her present. The hero is silent, turning towards the light. A thought sounds in his head. This is his chance, which he simply must use. Now he is determined to change the situation in his favor. A smile of self-satisfaction flashes across his face. His plan is to lure the majority to his side. The Duchess, in a panic, suddenly stops, raising her hand with a sharp cry. "Stop!" Her eyes are wide open, and her face is full of determination and despair. She managed and is now glad that she will do something. The maid next to her shudders and exclaims in fear, because she did not have time to stop the lord. The future duke, standing a little further away, says in surprise, "Die Duchess?" The young man stands thoughtfully, tension flickering across his face, as he says the Duchess's name out loud. Everyone in the room is frozen, awaiting his next move, and his thoughts are seething, trying to figure out what she is up to. Meanwhile, her plan remains unknown, as are her plans for the future. The little girl confidently moves forward, approaching her father's table. She sat motionless, her gaze focused, and behind her the tension grew. The servants looked at each other, doubting whether this was really the same Duchess. They knew her behavior, and perfect greeting made them doubt their previous ideas. Now this person was very different. The little girl smiled, her eyes shining with determination and a hint of excitement. Inwardly, she felt a sense of pride in her decision. "I'd like to show the esteemed Duke something," she said, raising her hand to her heart. Her voice was confident, as if she knew the moment had come, and her words were pleasant to the ear. Brontes, raising his hand in irritation, addresses the Duchess demandingly, insisting on an answer as to what she intends to do in this situation. His indignation intensifies when he casts a disdainful glance at the model of the fortress, arguing that now is not the time for games, which will definitely be given attention only after the meeting. A little girl with bright violet eyes stops abruptly, her face reflecting determination and indignation. Clenching her hand into a fist, she asks a loud question full of indignation. "How can you call an important thing a toy?" Something inside her changes, and a magical symbol begins to glow on her palm, awakening an unknown power. The Duchess happily picks up the magical branch, smiling proudly, her face glowing with enthusiasm, and her eyes full of sparkle. She is ready to demonstrate the power of this artifact. Meanwhile, the man opposite is shocked. He cannot believe his eyes and exclaims in surprise, because the winter branch always seemed like something unattainable. The little Duchess confidently holds a magical branch in her hands, looking at her interlocutor with determination. She is full of enthusiasm to master this power as soon as possible, before the beginning of lessons with the governess. The heroine is confident that if this artifact is used correctly, then the winter can be spent in warmth and comfort. The branch has always been imbued with a magical aura. Midwinter brings with it the harshest cold, and it is this branch that is able to absorb the cold and manipulate it using mana, becoming an important symbol of control over the elements. He clenched his fist, unable to believe his eyes. Excitement overwhelmed him, and his indignation burst forth. The hero was certain this was some kind of deception. It was impossible for what was happening to be real. His thoughts were spinning, and his voice trembled with rage and disbelief. A man in rich clothes points nervously with his hand. His voice sounds indignant. He loudly declares that he has never heard of anyone receiving a branch before coming of age. There is a mixture of bewilderment and anger in his voice, and his posture expresses displeasure and disbelief at what is happening. The girl with an indignant expression on her face holds a magic wand in her hand. Her eyes are wide open, and her voice is full of indignation. She objects to the accusation, exclaiming that there is no deception, and reproaches her opponent for rudeness. With confidence, she adds that, if she were deceiving, she would not have shown her power. The beauty explains with a determined expression that the Duke gave her the winter branch, confirming her words with pride, her large purple eyes shining as she tells this to those present. One of the men in the room is shocked by her words, which immediately causes a tense reaction among the rest of the meeting participants. A little wary, the hero ponders the sudden news, his gaze tense, his thoughts restless. Did the Duke really help her master such power? His doubts begin to turn into panic, because such events can radically change the balance of power. The boy was shocked, his face expressing alarm and confusion. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Duke was so weak from illness that it seemed he couldn't even move. His thoughts were overwhelming. Did he really help take possession of the branch? He stood there frowning, looking ahead. A cold determination was visible in his eyes. Thoughts rushed through his head. His condition was really improving. Doubts began to overcome him. But outwardly, he remained cool, preparing for the next step. The girl watches what is happening carefully, thinking to herself that this man must have come to the same conclusion as she did. The scene where Kian opened the door to the treasury pops up in her thoughts. But she decides that since he is her father's assistant, this is in essence the same thing. The hero turns to the man trying to verify the truth of the Duchess's words. His voice sounds with notes of doubt, and he clarifies whether the Duchess is really the owner of the winter branch. The guy sitting at the table looks a little surprised by this question. The man in dark clothes straightens up, his voice trembling with surprise. He asks the Duke if the Duchess really owns the winter branch, his face expressing doubt and tension. The Duke, after a pause, slightly frowning, confirms this, crying out in surprise, then declares that Uriel is simply magnificent. The hero looks on in surprise, his gaze full of awareness and slight shock. Thoughts take hold of him. He thought that his fate was predetermined, and he was destined only to watch the decline of the Solgrins. But what is happening before him seems to change his perception of reality. The girl smiles joyfully, holding a branch in her hands, symbolizing her incredible achievement. Her face glows with happiness, and those around her congratulate her on this victory. For such a young age, her success seems amazing, and amazing admiration for her spreads throughout the hall. The blond man, standing with an elegant hand gesture, maintains his composure. Despite the admiration in the air, he gently interrupts the conversation, mentioning that it is not the time to talk about the teacher, while the thought of the future of the Solgrins family is born as a new hope. Hervin calmly lowers himself, announcing that the meeting is over and everyone is free to go. His calm and confidence left no doubt as to who was in charge here. He controlled every movement, every word, and cuts off anyone from the council who wanted to object to something. Evriel stood in front of him with a branch in her hands, her eyes sparkling with excitement, a slight smile on her face. She said that she wanted to say something else. The young man listened attentively, frowning slightly, asking what exactly. His face became serious, and he quietly told her to follow him, outlining something important, but away from the eyes of other people. The girl lowered her head nervously, crossing her arms, her thoughts racing. She expected her father to scold her, because his displeasure seemed obvious. However, contrary to her expectations, the situation did not turn out. As she imagined, the look at her father's clenched fist increased her anxiety. The beauty looked at her fingers with quiet surprise. feeling how excitement and fear were gradually replaced by the realization that the branch had truly submitted to her will. Although until that moment, she had not been confident in her powers. This thought filled her head, instilling new confidence. The daughter looked intently at the symbol on her hand. She clearly remembered the moment when thinking about protecting her family. She felt something akin to this branch. This realization filled her soul with strength and confidence in her destiny. The Duke looked at her carefully, his voice stern but with restrained approval. He noted that, at her age, he would not have been able to master such power. All the heads of their family received branches only upon reaching adulthood, and this made her achievement unique, deserving of respect. Arms folded across her chest, Every looked straight into her father's eyes, his gaze stern and focused. He warned her against celebrating, as she still needed a scolding. He narrowed his eyes questioningly, asking if Kian had shown her the way to the artifact, clearly suspecting his interference. That day, with a serious and focused look, the young man said that in the center of the treasury there was a stone gate behind which the main relic of the Solgren's family was kept. He warned that it could be dangerous there, and urged that under no circumstances should they touch it. Evriel nodded slightly in response, a guilty expression on her face, realizing that her actions had not gone unnoticed. The man standing opposite her emphasized with a cold tone that she had ignored the warning and had even drawn Lily into her actions, which only made the situation worse. Guiltily lowering her gaze, she admitted her mistake to the vassals, feeling the weight of guilt pressing on her shoulders. But despite this, she believed in her strength because the Winter Branch had chosen her, and she was confident that she could cope with the responsibility placed upon her. The man with his arms folded looked sternly at the girl. His voice sounded cold and decisive. He forbade her to use the branch until she came of age. Meanwhile, the girl with a determined expression on her face nodded and rushed to the door, firmly deciding that she needed to learn how to handle the branch. The Duke, with a cold expression on his face, folded his arms. Silently ponders, looking at his daughter, who is clearly worried Hervin does not suspect, but this winter will be terrible because of the avalanche. The girl does not remember the exact details, but understands that they definitely need to be prepared for absolutely everything. Evriel looks up, hopefully trying to catch his eye, her voice trembling with excitement as she asks for permission. Trying to speak as confidently as possible, the blonde sincerely strives to earn his trust and support, trying to convince him of her intentions that this is important to her. The man looks at his daughter with a stern expression as he sits down next to her, his words sounding serious, warning her that wielding a branch is one thing, but being able to control it is quite another. He is worried about her fragile body, especially mentioning that absorbing the harsh cold could be dangerous for her. Evriel flushes with excitement. Her face tense and her eyes burning with determination, she exclaims that the cold is far more dangerous. Her voice trembling with emotion, the strong lines and dynamic colors around her, highlighting her inner protest and dissent. He looks down at her, the argument behind him. His words sharp and firm, the tall figure of the man, a stark contrast to the small girl who is clearly nervous. Despite her protest, he reminds her that they have been coping with the cold for years. Even without the help of the Winter Branch, there is no point in returning to something so dangerous now when there is no great need for it. Evriel, holding back tears, slowly turns away after she was told to go back to her room, her small hand clutching the hem of her robe as if trying to find comfort in her thoughts. But nothing really helped. A question kept spinning in her head that she didn't dare ask out loud. Why didn't her father believe her? The blonde struggled to contain her emotions, watching the stern expression on his face. The girl was struggling with her inner feelings. Her tears betraying the tension. Words about the situation getting out of control flashed through her head. But a voice inside asked her to look at the man. A bit of concern, and even a little sadness, could be seen in his eyes. The protagonist stared at the man, noticing something new in his expression. Immediately after those very words, her heart sank as she realized the worry lurking behind his cold facade. His voice was quiet, but filled with excitement. She wondered if her father was truly worried about her, sensing the worry reflected on his face. Evriel stood still, watching as the one she loved most walked away, leaving her in the shadow of his determination. No more words were spoken, because he had decided so. His voice was quiet but firm, as he told her to rest, to leave the room, and not to think about the branch of winter. Her eyes followed him, as if trying to catch something unsaid, but his figure was already beginning to dissolve in the semi-darkness, leaving no chance. Suddenly freezing, the girl realized that something had gone wrong. Her eyes widened, and her heart began to beat faster. She leaned forward sharply, realizing with horror that she had not received permission. A whirlwind of self-accusations swirled in her thoughts, causing her to silently curse her inattention. It was worth pressing to finally get what she coveted. Stopping for a moment, the beauty looked around in confusion. Her thoughts suddenly switched to something strange, as if someone had spoken to her before. But she did not remember who exactly. Looking around uncertainly, she quietly wondered who it could be, because there was no one around. That tone and voice seemed unfamiliar. Solgren Jr. looked around the room thoughtfully, feeling tired from a long day full of events. Her head was scattered, too much had happened, and she felt sleep gradually creeping in. Stretching, the beauty slightly lost concentration, barely staying on her feet, and quietly whispered to herself that she wanted to sleep. She had absolutely no strength left. The day had ended quickly. Evriel slowly opened her eyes, still immersed in sleep, in order to look around. A voice insistently called her to wake up. Although there was silence all around, these were still some tricks of the brain. She tried to understand where this strange whisper was coming from, which seemed both distant and close. At the same time, a feeling of incomprehension crept into her consciousness. Awakening anxiety. It was difficult to gather herself. She had to instantly tense up after hearing a voice informing her that she was in danger. In fear, she turned her head sharply, but her thoughts did not have time to comprehend what was happening, as a mysterious stranger appeared in front of her. "Who are you, and how dare you break into my room?" she thought, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. And then a scream rang out. The young man, his head bowed, apologizes. Feeling guilty, Kian's voice sounds quiet and humble, but his interlocutor, standing with his back to him, calmly replies that he did not forbid him to enter the treasury. He was too busy at that moment to pay attention to such trifles, and therefore has the right to blame only himself. The man, his expression serious, says thoughtfully that he himself hadn't expected such a turn of events. His gaze shifts to the side, as if he's pondering what just happened, a slight shadow of worry and responsibility casting itself across his features as the image of what happened at that meeting quickly replays itself in his mind. A man with short dark hair leans forward, offering to discuss the lady's governess, with a slight grin, his face radiating confidence, as if he already knows that this proposal will generate interest. The atmosphere of a tense meeting envelops the room. This time he was interrupted right in the middle of a sentence, not allowing him to finish his thought. The hero stands in the shadows, his hands behind his back, his gaze directed to the side, as if he is immersed in his own thoughts. The moon illuminates him, dimly emphasizing the pensive expression on his face. A realization flickers in his thoughts. The lady has really changed, and this is noticeable to everyone. Looking thoughtfully into the distance, the guy could not hold back his gaze. He was full of doubts. His thoughts revolved around Lady Tillion's words. He could not be sure if she was telling the truth when he noticed how the lady behaved differently, and this feeling of uncertainty did not leave him, forcing him to analyze her words again and again and try to unravel her true motives. The boy stood there, thoughtfully touching his chin with his fingers, as if considering possible actions. His companion suggested telling the lady about his concerns, but he remained silent, digesting what he had heard. Tension was reflected in his eyes, and his thoughts were confused, trying to find the right solution. Kian chuckled slightly, his eyes sparkling with cunning, when he heard the question about eavesdropping. His hand habitually slid to his ear, as if confirming his words. He calmly stated that he had the excellent hearing characteristic of his race, and no details escaped him. The blonde slowly raised his hand, as if thinking about his words. There was a cold detachment in his voice. He said that any normal father would be worried in such a situation, but he was not. His tone was quiet, but there was a determination in it that left no room for doubt. The winter grew harsher, and with each passing day, the frequency of the attacks increased. The symptoms seemed to worsen with inexorable speed, causing his body to weaken fatigue to take hold of him, making every movement painful, those around him silently watching, helplessly clenching their fists, death creeping ever closer. Its cold breath already felt in the shadows of the room, penetrating the hearts of those witnessing his agony. He understands that his actions are only confusing his daughter, although he does this unintentionally. His gaze, sometimes cold, sometimes full of concern, reflected an internal struggle, because he realized that his behavior was confusing the little girl. Sometimes he showed indifference. Sometimes he worried about her. Then he was kind, but soon he pushed her away again, not allowing her to get used to something more. No matter how hard he tries to deny the obvious, the man is still a pathetic imitation of the Duke. The child did nothing to deserve the bad treatment that is now consuming her, leaving not a single personal particle. The hero stood in the dim light of the room, his gaze fixed on the void, and contradictions boiled within him. He wanted to do too much, but the possibilities did not match it. His words sounded coldly determined. It was better to become Every's nightmare than a father. Fear for her gave birth to severity in him, because this is how he believed she would be able to survive in a cruel world that was ready to do anything to end a happy life. His gaze softened despite his cold words. He understood that in the little girl's heart, he was just a shadow of the past, a terrible dream from which she would one day awaken. The slight smile on his face didn't hide the bitterness lurking within. When she forgot about him, her life would be better, he thought. The hero stood in silence, staring thoughtfully into space, his face awash with complex emotions, as if an internal struggle were tearing him apart. Thoughts of how he was entangling Every never leaving him. He veered from indifferent to worried to friendly, aware that he was causing turmoil in her soul. Kian calmly asked if everything was all right, but received no answer as the Duke fell unconscious onto the cold floor. A dark masked figure, dagger in hand, pierced the tense atmosphere. His eyes blazed with determination, and an ominous blue light spread around him. A lightning-fast movement, and the enemy was ready to attack. He exhaled a single word full of menace and danger. The attack had happened, and a sense of foreboding hung in the air. Brontes, in a stern uniform, with an inscrutable expression, holds a glass of drink in his hand as he addresses the Duchess. His voice full of concern, but beneath the surface there is something more. He reminds her that it is time for bed, as if trying to maintain control of the situation, and pretends that he is not standing in her room in the middle of the night. The brunette stares at him with a hard gaze, his teeth clenched in determination. His thoughts full of determination, he whispers to himself that he will deal with the girl first, as if she is his main goal. The luxurious Sorgan's mansion rises before him, cold and majestic, promising new conspiracies. He plans to return here in a year, when the meeting becomes inevitable, and make sure that the future is good. Despite her young age, the Duchess's power is growing every day, and she is already close to taking control of the Winter Branch, which of course will not be something positive, while at the same time, disappointment is growing in Brontes's thoughts. All the plans that seemed reliable are now collapsing. He has no right to allow something terrible to happen. The man is overcome with fear. He understands that any improvement in the Duke's condition will lead to his inevitable death. The Emperor will not give him a chance for justification. He still clearly understands that his fate is predetermined. The Emperor wants to see the blonde dead in order to eliminate him as an obstacle in his path. The girl looks closely at the man, noticing how his gaze has changed. Something in his expression has become alarming, and her heart squeezes with anxiety. She tries to calm herself, thinking that he does not have any weapons on him, but the thought does not give her peace, because it is unknown what exactly has changed in his intentions. The boy doesn't let go of the small blue vessel, because it's important his movements are slow but confident. He says that it's a common antipyretic, but there's a certain carelessness in his voice, as if he himself doesn't believe what he's saying. His gaze is cold, and his actions seem deliberate. Every looks at the man with fury and disbelief. Her eyes full of indignation, she does not believe his words about the fever reducer, and asks sharply. It seems she suspects him of hiding his true intentions. Her voice is full of defiance when she sarcastically asks if he is going to pass off her death as a failed training session with the Winter Branch. Most antipyretics contained poisonous herbs that lowered body temperature, making the pain go away. However, she understood that if she took the medicine in its pure form without proper processing, it could lead to death from hypothermia, ending the horror. The girl stood resolutely, showing that she was not afraid, holding her head high. Despite the anxiety inside her, she knew that if her body was found cold in the morning, everyone would believe the version that the reason was training with a winter branch. There was despair in her voice, but she stubbornly walked towards her goal, not wanting to succumb to fear of the possible consequences. Her gaze gradually fills with worry as she notices the man's expression change. Fortunately, she realizes that he doesn't have a weapon on him, which gives her some relief, but she remains on guard. The thought that Lily's room is nearby, and if she screams, she will be heard, calms her only for a moment, because a noise begins in the corridor. At this time, an unknown person, wrapped in darkness, suddenly attacks Belgrin, catching her off guard. Brontes looks at her with a sly smile, holding a bottle with an unknown liquid in his hand. He offers a deal full of danger and blackmail, calmly and confidently. He says that the Duchess will be released if she just drinks the contents of the bottle, and he himself knows that he has driven her into a corner, playing on her fears and sense of responsibility for others, and especially for a loved one. His gaze had changed completely, and she noticed it, her chest filling with anxiety. But then she sighed with relief. Fortunately, he didn't have a weapon. Although she tried to calm herself, the thought still swirled in her head. What was he really planning? Lily shouted at the heroine not to drink anything. It was best to calm down. Even if the Duchess took the medicine, Brontes would still deal with the maid. The girl grips the magic staff tightly in her hands, gathering all her determination. She looks at the enemy, her eyes reflecting determination and fear. The man smiles mockingly in response, not believing the seriousness of the threat. His words are full of arrogance. He is sure that the girl will not be able to use her weapon. The girl looks at the staff in her hands with anxiety. She is not sure if she can use it properly, but the determination in her heart grows stronger. The thought that she can help Lily escape fills her with hope. Despite the fear, she squeezes the staff tighter, deciding to take the risk for the sake of salvation. The heroine feels an inner voice wondering where it comes from. This unexpected dialogue in her head causes anxiety, especially at such a critical moment. However, the stranger does not want to waste time on explanations and directly says that they need to hurry because the approaching threat is becoming more and more obvious. He clutches the vessel tightly in his hands, his movements nervous and quick mentally. Brontes realizes that only wizards are capable of controlling the magic of the winter branch. But now his choice is limited. He feels how, with every moment, the situation is getting out of control, but there is no turning back. The girl clutches the branch tightly in her hands, doubts flicker in her eyes. She does not consider herself a sorceress, but understands that this is only a temporary obstacle. Her thoughts are directed to the future, where she will be able to open any door with magic. Now she feels her weakness, but believes in her strength. The man looks down, his face lit up with a malicious smile, and in his hands is a bottle. Ivriel is in despair. She does not understand what is happening, but she knows that the situation is critical. She prays for help, realizing that otherwise she will not survive. The hero offers her the only way out, to drink what is being handed to her otherwise, as he assures she will die. She still hears a strange voice in her head, confidently saying that everything is logical and he will help, but she shouldn't be too afraid. She tries to comprehend what she heard, but her thoughts are confused. The beauty wonders what she shouldn't be afraid of. What is this all about? And then, with anxiety in her eyes, she looks ahead, not understanding what to do next. She suddenly feels something strange. A powerful energy begins to surround her, swirling around her body. Fear contorts her face, and one question occupies her mind. What is this? The sensations are strange, as if an unknown force is invading her body, overwhelming her consciousness. She realizes with horror that something is possessing her, and she is powerless to stop it. Her body is engulfed in an alluring and frightening whirlwind of magical energy. A voice inside explains, "This is mana, streams of power flowing through the entire world." The maiden clenches her teeth, trying to control this strange alien energy, but her feelings seem to explode. She screams, experiencing indescribably strange sensations. The vortex of magical energy continues to swirl around her, becoming increasingly uncontrollable. A voice inside her tries to call her to calm warning that further resistance could lead to disaster. Her hair flutters in streams of mana, and everything around her seems to be plunging into chaos as she fights this force. The brunette, stunned by what was happening, presses his hand hard to his head, trying to understand what is happening around him. His face is distorted with panic and pain when streams of magical energy surround his body, consuming him entirely. He tries to contain the growing power, but the magic going out of control only intensifies, forcing him to scream in despair. The girl stands in the middle of the room, clutching a stick, streams of magical energy swirling around her. She looks at her hands, shocked, her hair fluttering in a whirlwind of magic in front of her. Is her opponent thrown back by a powerful force who no longer tries to escape? She is stunned and does not understand what just happened. Everything seems unreal. The determination still flickered in her eyes. The main character already felt capable of controlling the magical power, and now a door appeared in her path. "I told you not to be afraid." The thought flashed right in front of her. A mysterious portal appeared in the form of an ordinary door, hiding the unknown behind it. And after a second, it began to become more and more transparent. The Duchess stared into the distance, her gaze full of mixed feelings that were changing. It was all over. The realization was slowly coming to her. Her thoughts were confused, but she knew she needed to call people to check if Lily was okay. Worry for the maid was weighing on her, making her heart squeeze as she tried to pull herself together and cope with the surging emotions. None of them deserved what they experienced that night. The Duchess swayed slightly, feeling uneasy. There were traces of blood on her fingers, and this puzzled her because it was coming from her nose. The words of her father, who once warned her about this, floated into her head. She did not listen at this time. Kian hurried to her with concern in his eyes, exclaiming about her well-being. The Duchess is stunned, looking at Rasher before her, the thought flashing through her mind. He's alive. Weakness takes over, and she falls to the ground, clutching a branch in her hand. She whispers words of gratitude for saving her, but then almost faints. Her last thoughts were that the man had appeared at just the right moment, but her body could no longer resist the fatigue. The blonde woke up in a different room, unfamiliar and quiet. Her eyes opened slightly. She looked around the space, realizing that she was not in her bedroom. This was not the familiar corner where she usually fell asleep. Her heart accelerated, but she held back the panic. A quiet whisper in her head reminded her to stay calm despite the strange situation. The beauty slowly sat up in bed, not fully understanding where she was. Her eyes stopped on the silhouette of a man by the bed. A quiet whisper in her head pierced her consciousness. Someone was standing next to her. With difficulty comprehending what was happening, she tried to figure out who this person was. Soon it dawned on her. Her father was standing in front of her. With each passing moment, her thoughts became clearer. The Duchess felt weak and feverish, which confused her consciousness. She thought that the hallucinations were caused by the temperature, but the strange images did not disappear. She could hardly distinguish sounds and movements around her. Her vision became clouded. A desperate thought flashed through her head. No, this is not a dream. This is reality. But she no longer had the strength to resist. In the dimly lit room, a man with white hair walked slowly away, without turning around, his silhouette lost in the semi-darkness. Leaving behind a cold feeling of emptiness, the girl weakly extended her hand. Her voice was quiet and trembling. She did not want him to leave a weak whisper. "Don't go, Dad," sounded like a desperate call, but the man continued on his way without stopping. A small child curled up under a blanket, buried her face in the pillow. Her eyes filled with tears that glistened, rolling down her cheeks. She tightly clutched the edge of the blanket in her hand, as if it could protect her from loneliness. A quiet, trembling voice, barely audible in the darkness. She did not want to be alone, but this feeling left her with every step of the man. Two men stood by the massive doors, behind which a secret seemed to be hidden. One of them, tall and commanding, held his hand closed, ready to speak. The other, hands clasped behind his back, was making a report. They had concluded their investigation, and the man named Brontes had been thrown into prison. Tension hung in the air, as if something momentous was about to happen. The white-haired man, clearly the leader, turned and praised his subordinate for his excellent work, promising to deal with the prisoner later. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed a hidden determination. The second man, listening to the praise, merely bowed his head slightly, acknowledging his superior's words. Behind them, the shadows of buildings stretched into the distance, adding a sense of mystery to the scene. Kian, with a serious expression, is aware of the tension of the moment, but despite its importance, he tries to keep his emotions under control. He says that now is not the time for arguments, indicating the need to postpone the discussion. His gaze is focused while another person stands next to him. His head turned as if waiting for further action. The young man stares ahead, his gaze filled with determination. He says that there are more suitable people for this task, adding that without their involvement, the situation will become dangerous. His voice is full of confidence, but in his eyes there is a hint of concern for the safety of the one to whom his words are addressed. The blond man overreacts. His daughter almost died. It becomes scary and impossible to breathe. Everything happened because of the Duke. That's how he begins to blame himself. Because next to him, the girl is in danger, even at night. No one knows how many times something like this can happen. But with different people, Brontes was locked up. But that doesn't mean anything. It was for this very reason that the man did not want to leave the baby near him. He remembers the words of his wife, who asked him to protect Ivriel, instead of her hoping that everything would end well. There are too many thoughts in his head that are mixed up, not allowing him to make the most important decision. The hero is full of determination and anger. His thoughts are focused on the fact that he is not going to leave everything as it is. Memories flash when he realizes that the enemy's condition has suddenly improved, and now he has grabbed him by the throat. He is surprised, not understanding what could have gone wrong. It seems that everything went against his plan, and now he will have to deal with the consequences of an unexpected turn. The Duke staggered back, his body tensed from the unexpected blow, and his eyes showed confusion and pain. He barely had time to realize what was happening when shadows flickered around him. The hero freezes in horror, because only now he realized what he did wrong. The hero stood in the shadow of the bars, his gaze cold and distant. He turned to Kian without raising his head, as if he didn't find any sense in it. His order was clear and firm. Do not let Ivriel near him when she woke up. This decision was not easy for him, but he knew that it was for the best. His fist clenched nervously in his hand, hiding his true feelings. Brontes lay exhausted on the cold floor. His breathing hoarse, the laws of the Empire inexorably determined his fate. He must stand trial for his actions. His family would not escape the consequences. They would all be sent into exile. Thoughts of inevitable retribution haunted him, and the gravity of his situation weighed on him ever more, turning his final moments into torment. Kian slowly moves away from the door, silently giving orders. He tells them not to let Ivriel in as soon as she regains consciousness. There is alienation and hidden determination in his voice. Thoughts about the consequences of what happened do not give him peace, but he does not show this to those around him. In his soul, he understands that this is the only right way out. Although he does not fully agree with this decision, the girl wrapped in a red blanket sits on the floor. Her gaze is anxious, but she tries to hold on. She looks at Lily, who is sobbing, and tries to cheer her up, a soft timbre full of care sounds in the silence. She does not need to cry. There is no need to be so upset. The girl looks back with wide eyes. Her heart is squeezed with worries, but the words bring a feeling of relief in her. The maid bows her head and covers her face with her hands, unable to hold back her tears. She sobs quietly, thinking over everything that happened. Gratitude for being saved sounds in her voice, but the pain of what she experienced is still too fresh. The little girl cannot contain her emotions. When she saw that her mistress had woken up, tears began to flow of their own accord without her will. The man dressed in an elegant green suit with gold details slightly bowed his head. Looking at the lady with restraint, sincere concern can be heard. He asks a question, trying to understand if everything is okay. But she, having briefly and coldly answered no, tries to hide her true emotions. Although the feeling of chills still bothers her body, after she picked up the thing, a strange sensation swept over her body. The mana emanating from the object caused a chill, as if cold waves rolled across her skin. She lightly pressed her hands to her chest, trying to sort out her feelings, standing in the middle of a winter landscape where everything around seemed alien and mysterious. Evriel thought with a slight sadness about how owning the winter branch affected her body. The memories of recent events made her heart clench, but she gathered her will into a fist. Now she felt like she was fine, especially in comparison to recent difficulties. Her gaze was full of determination, despite the cold and pain that she was overcoming. Lily sat across from Evri, her gaze betraying a look of alarm she tried to hide. She didn't want to think about what lay ahead, but she couldn't help but mention that the one who had harmed her was currently locked up and awaiting trial. She held a cup of water in her hand, which she offered to the mistress, trying to calm her. Solgren accepted the water, not looking away, and sighed heavily. Her eyes glowed softly, and a slight weariness was evident on her face. The conference had ended, and Lily had advised her mistress to simply rest. Evriel, with a playful expression, winked at Lily, trying to hide her tension, and took a small sip, savoring the brief moment of peace. The woman barely touched her cup, but a thought flashed through her mind. Something was wrong. The annual meeting had never ended so quickly. Lily and Aiden stood next to her, both looking worried. Aiden, raising the question, wondered if the meeting had ended too early. Their eyes met, and something unsettling hung in the air, though words hadn't yet been spoken. The lady slowly opened her eyes, her body weak and her mind clouded. Aiden stood by her bedside calmly but seriously, informing her that she had been unconscious for 3 whole days. His words about yesterday's meeting being adjourned didn't immediately register. The tension in the room reflected something more than just the meeting's conclusion. Uriel is surprised to realize that she has slept for 3 days. She could not believe it, and in confusion, she raises the cup to her lips, trying to comprehend what happened. Thoughts of Brontes, who once dreamed of a complete change of power, are still swirling in her head, and her anxiety intensifies. Her violet eyes are full of questions, but she tries to remain collected, not showing her anxiety to those around her. There were too many memories in her head about what had happened to Brontes, reminding her that he had been planning all these murders for a long time. Thoughts were spinning in her head about how many more people had become victims of his insidious plans. Her hand was clutching the weapon, and her heart was beating faster and faster, ready for the decisive step. The mistress suddenly got up from the bed, her gaze full of determination, not yet fully recovered. She is rushing somewhere, as if she has no time left to rest. The voice of the maid behind her, full of concern, calls her to stop, but this does not stop her. Lily screams in panic that she cannot move while she is not yet recovered, but the mistress is already running out of the room. A girl in a white dress with a blue bow on her head walks forward, resolutely saying that she needs to see her father. Her eyes show determination, but also fear at the same time, as if she understands that it may not be so easy. A man stands in front of her with a stern expression and a cold answer. No. His words cut the air, depriving her of her last hope. The heroine, with a confused expression on her face, raises her hand and says in panic, "Why? How so?" Her face reflects a mixture of incomprehension and anxiety. The man standing in front of her remains calm and explains in an even voice that his lordship is currently resting. The words fill the silence of the room, and all eyes are glued to her reaction. The girl touches her forehead faintly, as if trying to clear her thoughts. She remembers the fragility of her father. With a hint of regret and anxiety, she realizes that she has completely forgotten about it. Memories of the dream in which he appeared return, causing a vague feeling in her soul, as if something has slipped away. Her gaze becomes thoughtful, and questions about the reality of these visions flash through her head. A girl with large lilac eyes looks up with slight despair, as if searching for an opportunity to change a decision already made by someone important to her. She presses her hands to her chest, hoping for at least a short meeting. Her thoughts are filled with only one desire: to ask an important question that haunts her. She is ready to bargain even for a few minutes to hear the answer. Kian, his face serious and his eyes weary, stands before the door, his posture calm but determined. He coldly refuses entry, emphasizing that he has been ordered not to let anyone in. There's no doubt in his mind. He must follow orders no matter what the pleas. The answer is final, and no amount of persuasion will change his mind. A little girl with shining, hopeful eyes looks imploringly at the man. Her voice trembling with excitement, she timidly asks if it is possible to see her father for at least a minute. But the man calmly refuses, emphasizing that his orders do not allow him to disobey the order. In despair, the girl asks for at least 30 seconds, but his face remains cold and unyielding. Rasher drops to one knee in front of the girl, trying to explain the situation. His voice is soft but firm. He cannot open the door at her request. His lordship's orders stand above everything, even his personal convictions. The Duchess looks up at him, her eyes filled with pleading, but she understands that it is impossible to change anything now. The little girl, her eyes filled with despair, taps her foot on the floor, expressing her indignation. She barely holds back tears as she talks about how much she wants to see her father. Her voice is full of emotion, almost trembling with excitement and resentment. No one understands why her simple wish seems so impossible to fulfill, because all she wants is. The man watches the little girl's whims with a barely restrained smile. His gaze softened, and he seems amused by her outburst of emotions. The thought flashes through his head, how an adult girl who usually behaves so responsibly can now be capricious like a child. He cannot resist the comparison. She is just like a little girl. The girl suddenly notices a wound on Kian's chin. Her gaze becomes concerned. She carefully notes this fact out loud. Her eyes widen slightly in surprise. The man smiles lightly in response, as if he does not attach any importance to this, and explains that he scratched himself with an ordinary paper knife. Looking at the man with concern, the beauty feels guilty for his wound. She quietly asks if he is in pain, and her eyes fill with sympathy. Kian smiles slightly, trying to calm her down, and says that this is a trifle compared to her injuries. Despite the pain, he makes it clear that he is more concerned about her suffering than his own. The girl quietly watches the boy, thinking that even he can make mistakes. Two adults stand in front of her discussing her condition. The man emphasizes that her recovery is now the most important thing. There is concern in his words, but also sternness, indicating the importance of caring for her health. The heroine's body suddenly shuddered, feeling the touch of hands that carefully held her by the shoulders. She looked around and met the gaze of the maid, who calmly confirmed Kian's words. Her voice was quiet but insistent. She really needed to eat. The girl frowned slightly, realizing that caring for her was important to everyone around her. The Duchess tugs fearfully at Belgren's dress, trying to stop her, as if hoping that time will slow down. Her thoughts are confused inside. She believes that she is not good enough, that her father still does not allow her to fully develop her abilities. Despite all her efforts, feelings are mixed with the desire to prove her strength, but this only makes it harder. Lily looks ahead thoughtfully, wondering if her father might be too ill to worry about her, her big worried eyes reflecting her doubts. But she decides to take action, clenching her fists. She says that she will quickly return to tell her father something important. There is determination in her voice, even if there are still doubts and fears inside. Kian stands before his mistress, his hands behind his back, his voice clear and confident, as he informs her that after the criminals were transported to Albion, they pretended to be trying to get into the Supreme Court. His mistress's face is expressionless. She simply replies, "Okay," accepting the information with composure, as if she was already accustomed to such news. Rasher stands next to the bed where his master sits, wrapped in blue blankets. His voice is filled with concern when he asks about the state of the wound. The master replies with a slight smile that it is hardly a wound and is surprised that Kian is worried about him. Their exchange is brief, but there is something more to it, a hidden affection that does not require unnecessary words. A man stands in a dimly lit room, his figure slightly outlined against the wall, portraits hanging in front of him, and symbols surrounding them. This place belongs to the Secret Security Service of Duke Solgren. Officially, Kian is his assistant, but his real occupation is hidden from many. He is a member of an elite secret squad that ensures the security of the duchy, and this mission of his is much more important than all the others. The blonde looked thoughtfully into the distance, his eyes full of doubt, but his face remained impassive. He knew that a difficult decision lay ahead. Who else in their circle was worthy of trust? In this situation, they needed to gather the best knights, those who were capable of protecting every. He thought about who could be entrusted with this mission because their future depended on it. Kian listened attentively, his head bowed, his gaze focused, and his lips pressed tightly together. He finally understood the importance of the upcoming mission and calmly agreed with the need for immediate departure. Placing his hand on his chest, he confirmed his decision as a sign of respect, preparing for the mission without hesitation. He knew that he had to act quickly to complete the task entrusted to him. The blond man lying on the bed smiles wearily, as if trying to comprehend what is happening around him. His breathing is ragged, and weakness covers his body, but resignation flashes in his eyes. An hourglass stands on the table nearby, and time inexorably flows through the sand, a reminder of inevitability. This is a symbol that the decision has already been made, and soon everything will change. His weakened body seemed to merge with the darkness of the room. Time dragged on painfully slowly, and the hourglass next to him reminded him of his inexorable pace. He realized that the symptoms were only getting worse. The pain was becoming part of his reality, and fear had settled deep in his soul. At this rate, he could turn into a monster, and this worried him more than anything. A heavy thought pierces his consciousness, as if the shadows of the past loom over every moment. An hourglass silently counting down the time that flows too quickly. He fears that soon he will completely go mad, plunging into chaos, where he will no longer be able to distinguish who is friend and who is foe. This fear poisons his mind, increasing despair and isolation. A small figure stands in front of the massive doors, her voice quietly carried in the air. She assures that everything is fine with her, she is cared for and protected. Her words sound not only calm, but also a desire to dispel other people's worries. The request not to get sick sounds sincere, as if she is afraid that something will happen to her father, and nothing will be possible to do. The girl doesn't go anywhere. Her hand is pressed tightly to her chest, as if trying to contain her emotions. Her voice sounds with trepidation and care when she talks about how important the one behind the door is to her. She whispers the wish for him to get well and stay next to her. Her eyes are filled with quiet hope and tenderness. Pressing her hands to her chest, the beauty gazed thoughtfully into the void, her thoughts swirling around the question. Did her father hear her words? Worry flashed in her eyes as she recalled how she screamed through the crack in the door, trying to reach him, but doubt arose in her heart. Perhaps her voice remained unheard, dissolving into silence. The character slowly reaches out to the vase. Her thoughts full of doubts, she is not sure whether to go and ask for what she has been thinking about for so long. Her fingers touch the cool surface when Lily notices her intention. The girl turns around, deciding to go to her father. But at that moment, their conversation is interrupted by the sudden appearance of a man, and the atmosphere instantly changes. Kian stood at the head of the group of men, confidently looking at the little girl in front of him. They came as soon as they heard that she regained consciousness. The concern in his voice was sincere. He was interested in her health. While the other men watched with restraint, the beauty was puzzled, not expecting to see all these people. She said in surprise, "The main character, why are they all here?" Her gaze was full of incomprehension. Kian looked at his mistress with restraint, trying to find his words. His voice was calm, but there was a sense of tension in it. He began to explain what happened while she was unconscious. The conference ended earlier than planned, but the vassals remained in the estate to conduct an investigation. This message seemed to require special care, so as not to alarm her. While Brontes was plotting and trying to carry out his conspiracy, the truth was slowly coming to light. He was embezzling large sums from the Solgren's family budget under the guise of running a business. His face expressed self-satisfaction, but those around him began to guess his true intentions. The coins circling around him symbolized his greed and thirst for power. A maid in a black uniform with a downcast gaze, she asks her question with doubt. How is it possible that the Duchess was able to suppress the Bronte's rebellion with the help of the branch? It seems almost unreal. The maid, without looking up, tries to explain what is happening, her voice trembling, and she gesticulates excitedly, describing strange events. The whole room was covered in snow, and it was difficult for her to believe what was happening. The other people gathered, look at her with confusion, and one of them clarifies. There were at least a dozen people there, surrounded by this inexplicable cold. Rumors of what happened spread with incredible speed. Surprised and worried servants talk among themselves. One of them, clearly amazed, asks again, "Is it really that many?" Another servant exclaims that he heard how she used her powerful energy to defeat an entire crowd of killers. This event left everyone in shock and gave rise to countless conversations and speculations. The little heroine reflects with surprise on the fact that now everyone knows about her feat. She defeated the rebels with the help of the Winter Branch, and now rumors about this have spread throughout the castle. Her face shines with pride, but at the same time, a slight uncertainty shines through in her eyes. Is it really true that they lost consciousness from her power? She is trying to comprehend what happened. The beauty stands in deep thought, her eyes full of determination. She tries to convince herself that everything is going well, that she has the strength to cope with the task at hand. Her thoughts are focused on one thing, to prove that she is able to control the artifact, clenching her hand into a fist. She gives herself confidence despite the internal doubts that flicker in her mind. The man with a respectful expression on his face addresses the Duchess, his gaze focused on her. He leaned forward slightly, as if emphasizing his request for attention. The little girl, a little embarrassed by his sudden address, listens attentively, her large eyes expressing curiosity and slight uncertainty. The question hangs in the air, waiting for her answer. The girl stares ahead, her huge purple eyes full of thoughtfulness. She feels herself under close observation and begins to suspect that the person who has come wants to check the veracity of the rumors about her. Excitement fills her, because this person can judge how useful she is and what dark traits he will notice. She feels that her nature may become obvious to everyone. The girl stands with her head held high, a slight contented smile adorning her face. In her thoughts, she tries to understand the motives behind what is happening. She is concerned that everyone has come to find out how she dealt with the branch. But for her, this seems ridiculous. Thinking about her helplessness fills her with slight irritation. The Duchess stands before a group of people with a cold gaze, surrounded by several servants. One of the men is confused, trying to understand what is being said, but her answer is merciless. He himself once called her incomplete Solgren, not considering her worthy now that she has regained her strength. His previous words expose his hypocrisy. The old man nervously justifies himself, spreading his hands, as if trying to explain his actions, his voice trembling when he says that he does everything solely for the Solgren's family. His face reflects the fear of something that can no longer be justified. The lie hidden behind these words is felt in every gesture, but he continues, hoping to convince those around him of his devotion. She closed her eyes, disappointment and sadness mixed on her face. A quiet but firm voice expressed her feelings, as if she was thinking out loud. Not understanding how good intentions could lead to such a nickname, there was bitterness in her words, as if she had long ago realized that excuses and promises no longer made sense. The Duchess looks at the man standing in front of her, with a bright smile. She speaks with ease and joy, like a weightless flower, advising him to go and apologize to the Duke. Her words sound insistent, but at the same time good-natured. Her gaze shines with inner confidence and calm, as if she knows for sure that her advice is the only right decision in this situation. A man with a serious expression looking straight ahead says that vile actions should be apologized for. A stern and inexorable tone is heard a little further on. Another man adds, with a smile, that the Duchess, despite her age, understands more than adults. This comment sounds with a slight mockery, but there is a hidden truth in it that is difficult to ignore. The little Duchess, with a serious but gentle expression, asks everyone not to quarrel. Her huge violet eyes look at the assembled group with kindness and determination. The adult standing next to her with restraint suggests continuing the conversation in the living room, his face stern and calm, and behind him stands a group of people ready to follow his suggestion. A man in a scarlet waistcoat with gold patterns looks at the little Duchess with slight concern. There is relief in his voice because he is glad that she has finally woken up. He politely asks about her well-being. His eyes reflect respect and some concern. The beauty is still silent, thinking about how to respond to the concern shown. The girl looked at her interlocutor with a slight smile, answering the question about her health briefly and confidently. Not bad, but another idea flickered in her thoughts, one believing that these people should be looked at more closely with subsequent determination. She thought about the future of her family, about the fact that she needed loyal people, ready to build a wonderful future. There was silence in the room, broken only by quiet questions. One of those gathered, glancing towards the table, inquired what was there in response. She was informed that these were gifts with wishes for a speedy recovery. Bright boxes with gifts lay in neat rows, each of them symbolizing the attention and care of people sincerely concerned about the health of the Duchess. A scene of awkwardness unfolded around the table in the living room. The girl exclaimed in embarrassment, not understanding why she was being reminded of her age again. A protest flashed through her thoughts. She was already 14. In another part of the room, a little girl sitting among the guests looked around nervously, and one of the men turned to her with a request to do something to defuse the situation. A man dressed in a formal red suit with gold trim sits with his head bowed intently, telling the Duchess that he has something important he wishes to convey to her personally. His gaze is intense, as if this offer conceals something more than just a gift. Around him, numerous gifts are visible, neatly arranged in boxes with bright ribbons. On the table in front of the Duchess lies a dagger with an exquisite blade, decorated with a pattern against a background of complex ornamentation. The heroine looks at it in surprise, realizing that this is not just a gift. A voice explains to her that this weapon is intended for self-defense, but also warns her that wielding such a dagger requires skill, without which its use can be dangerous. The beauty, with a thoughtful look, tightly clutches the dagger in her hands. She understands that this is not just a gift. It is engraved with the family coat of arms, which symbolizes loyalty and devotion. It seems to her that Bebane thinks that she does not understand the significance of this gesture, but the weapon with the coat of arms has a much deeper meaning for her than one can imagine. The lady sat in a chair by the fireplace. It seemed she was pondering the latest events. Her gaze was focused, but fatigue was evident in every movement. The servants, realizing that she needed rest, suggested that she leave slowly, getting up. They promised to return later. The room was filled with the warmth of the fire, creating a contrast with the coldness of her thoughts, going somewhere into the distance. The head of the May family, Isis, always inspired fear in her with her menacing appearance. She clasped her hands in hesitation, realizing that she had never dared to speak to her grandmother directly. The memory of her respectful gaze involuntarily caused a shudder, but at the same time, it reminded her of the importance of tradition and family, which the old woman tirelessly upheld. She sat on a large chair, staring into space, her violet eyes full of doubt, and thought about how she was not living up to her grandmother's expectations and constantly felt unworthy. Her mother was gone from her life. Her heart was sinking with fear of losing someone else close to her. Her strength was leaving her body, but she could not stop thinking about it. Isis, May, with a discreet bow of her head, delivers her wish with a slight bow, her voice calm, but her eyes tense, as she wishes the Duchess a good peaceful day, protected by fate. Her words accompanied by deep respect, as if there were more to them than mere formality. The Duchess is in a panic. Her eyes are wide and her face is filled with despair. She is afraid that if her grandmother leaves, she will never have a chance to talk to her again. These thoughts are overwhelming her. She feels like the opportunity is slipping away from her hands, and the fear of losing this moment presses harder and harder, making her heart beat faster. The lady tries to reach out to her grandmother. Fear and anxiety overwhelm her. She remembers how she had wanted to ask her grandmother about her mother before, but never dared. Now this opportunity is slipping away. She is in despair, almost screaming, asking her grandmother to stop feeling how her last chance is slipping through her fingers. The Duchess froze. The words stuck in her throat like a barrier she couldn't overcome. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't find the right words, and her thoughts were confused in her head. The gaze of gray eyes pierced her, and the feeling of helplessness grew. Nothing came to mind, and confusion paralyzed her completely, leaving only a painful silence. Isis, with a slight smile on her face, knelt down on one knee in front of the little Duchess, holding her hands tightly. Her eyes were full of relief, and there was genuine happiness in her voice. She quietly said how happy she was to see that the Duchess was okay. A warm atmosphere surrounded them. The golden light played on the walls, reflecting the quiet joy and peace at this moment. The blonde gently squeezes her grandmother's hand, feeling the warmth that brings her peace. The excitement in her voice is barely noticeable, but the sincere joy in her eyes betrays her emotions. Isis, looking at her with a warm smile, nods softly. Experiencing the same feelings, their silent understanding fills the room with warmth, as if this is a moment that both have been waiting for a long time. May, bowing her head, mutters something quietly, calling her words the ravings of an old man. Despite her humility, her eyes show concern and sadness. The little Duchess looks at her with concern, and as if feeling the full weight of the moment, steps back. Bowing as a sign of respect, she does not know what else to say, but her gesture speaks for itself. She cares. Several days passed, and rumors of Bronte's fate spread throughout the north, quickly accumulating new details. People whispered of the tragic accident in which he had supposedly died, and conversations continued within the castle's majestic walls. Some shared the news with alarm, others with relief. A shadow of uncertainty still hung over the palace. Two maids were talking quietly, their voices almost drowned out by the silence of the majestic castle. One of them was saying with alarm that the carriage had fallen into the canyon and Bronte's body had never been found. She added that, according to rumors, the guards and the coachman had survived, and the rumors were spreading, raising more and more questions. The little Duchess stood by the railing, gazing thoughtfully into the distance. Her gaze focused her thoughts, flowing smoothly. The conversation of two servants nearby riveted her attention. They were talking about how Brontes had not fallen by accident. Someone had dealt with him. She pondered this without showing her suspicions on her face, but clearly understood more than others. The emperor sat in his majesty, radiating a cold detachment, his thoughts wandering. If it were up to him, he would get rid of not only Brontes, but also everyone who could become a threat. The coachman and the guards, doubts awakened a sense of danger in him, but there was no answer yet. A disturbing question flitted through his thoughts. Was someone else involved in this? The person shrouded in light seemed to rest in the hands of an unknown force emanating from the goddess Shea. The thoughts became increasingly unclear. Was this truly divine intervention, or had someone skillfully disguised their actions as divine punishment? The answers were drowned in the light. The blonde rolled her eyes, her whole appearance showing irritation. She quietly grumbled that it was none of her business, completely refusing to interfere. Her gaze became more serious when her thoughts began to wander in another direction. There were more important things to worry about. Her tone changed to focused and thoughtful. The Duchess looked at Kian with hope in her eyes. Her small hands folded at her chest, her large violet eyes shining a request hidden behind her soft voice. She quietly asked if it was possible to see Dad today. Her voice sounded with a hint of anxiety and excitement. The girl stood expectantly, looking hopefully at the man in front of her, her eyes full of excitement, as if begging for a meeting with her father. But his answer was firm and disappointing. Sorry, but no. Over the past week since her awakening, her father has not come to her. Even once she felt like thorns were growing around her heart, leaving a pain of misunderstanding and a feeling that her father was deliberately avoiding her. The question filled with bitterness hung in the air. The maiden, with a cold glint in her eyes, looked away, trying to contain her emotions. Her gaze, although full of hidden pain, reflected inner disappointment and indignation. Her mind tried to figure out how no one still knew the reason why the Duke's wife left the mansion, but the answer remained a mystery. Memories flooded back unexpectedly. Tiliane spoke of Latisse, her mother, and how she had left this house, this mansion. Her quiet, distant voice wove into the darkness of her figure, as if she were speaking of a past that had left an indelible mark on her. The horror of memory lurked in every word, And this story was only the beginning of a much darker story. The Duke's ex-wife had betrayed him, running away into the dark, cold night, with a stranger, their figures lost in the snowy forest, but their silhouettes clearly spoke of determination and fear. The Duke's castle remained behind, immersed in silence, but ahead of them lay an unknown path, as if this blue crystal on the snow reflected all the uncertainty of their future. By candlelight, a woman dressed in an exquisite gown held a fan covering part of her face, as if concealing her intentions. She spoke of the theft of the Solgren's family heirloom, the frost flower. This news caused a furor in high society, shocking everyone present. Secrets of the Duke's past surfaced, leaving many questions. The heroine reflects on Lady Tillion's words. She didn't believe them, but every time her father avoided her and pushed her away, doubts began to creep into her soul. These thoughts seemed to poison her consciousness, gradually creeping into her heart. She recalls again how Tillion said that she and her mother were incredibly alike. These words made her wonder, what if it's true? The girl stands clutching the collar of her dress. Her thoughts are full of doubts and anxiety. What will happen if Tillion is right? The question worries her more and more. Her heart beats faster. She begins to tremble with worry if her father avoids her, because she reminds him of her mother. Fear paralyzes, forcing her to doubt her every step and word. The girl stood alone, trying to cope with the overwhelming feelings. Her voice, trembling with excitement, quietly says that she knows everything and can no longer hide it. Her gaze is filled with an internal struggle, but at that moment, her thoughts are suddenly interrupted. A small mouse appears on the way, who seems to greet her with his mischievous appearance. Lily and Kian are alarmed by the sharp sound that broke the silence. They ask what is going on, with obvious concern in their voices. At that moment, a little girl with rosy cheeks peeks out from around the corner, looks at the floor a little embarrassedly, and quietly says that there is something under her feet. The man standing at the door also looks down, slightly embarrassed. The little girl looked up, not hiding her confusion. There was a slight awkwardness in her words, as if she was afraid of her own unexpected reaction. She looked around, expecting possible consequences. Her heart beat faster, and with anxiety in her voice, she said that she thought something had happened again. Standing in the dimly lit room, a uniformed man leaned forward, with a determined expression on his face, as he gave an order, his voice full of confidence as he asked his lordship to return to the room and rest. While the assistant, with a drooping posture, reluctantly left, the scene walked away, hiding his emotions behind a calm exterior. The girl desperately tries to hold on to the man, tightly clutching his trousers. Her voice trembling with panic, she cannot let him go, because every movement he makes away causes unbearable pain. A wordless cry breaks out from within. The man stops his cold expression, hides confusion, but her plea is too strong a blow to not react. The girl watches the man leave with anxiety, her heart squeezed with pain. She understands that she must say something, that her silence could separate them forever. But the words get stuck in her throat. Tears themselves begin to flow down her cheeks, dripping onto the floor, as if reflecting her confusion and despair. She needs to say so much, but she cannot find the right words. Virgo, holding back tears with all her might, clings to the man, as if afraid that he will disappear again. She sobs quietly, trying to say how long she has been waiting for this meeting. The words are filled with despair. She admits that she was scared being alone and begs him not to leave her. In every gesture, one can feel the fear of losing the most important thing to which she is so attached. No longer able to contain her emotions, the little girl looks straight into the eyes of the man who is kneeling in front of her and whispers with resentment that he is very bad and that she hates him. Her words are filled with pain and disappointment, as if she cannot understand why she was hurt so much. Her body trembles, tears well up in her eyes, and soon she bursts into tears, unable to hide her despair any longer. The man looks away, his gaze filled with longing and inner pain. A question sounds in his head that seems to haunt him. Why can one love such an insignificant father? He is immersed in thought, his face expresses deep sadness and self-flagellation. As if unable to find answers, he continues to torment himself with doubts, seeing no way to atone for his guilt. The maid stands before him, her face expressing excitement, but she speaks confidently. He himself asked this question, and now she gives an answer that seems to cut his heart. The mistress loves him with all her heart, as he loves her. These words resonate in him, causing a feeling of guilt and longing, because the love in question seems to him something unattainable. The blond man was lost in thought, trying to find answers to questions that were important to him. He calmly reasoned that the love of parents for their children, and vice versa, is natural that parents love their children, and children in turn love their parents. His gaze seemed indifferent, but his words revealed an inner tension. A servant nearby humbly asked that the master spend more time with the little mistress, begging for understanding. He sat there staring thoughtfully into the distance, letting his thoughts drift into the silence. His gaze was empty, as if he was trying to understand something, but couldn't find the answers. With a heavy sigh, he said to himself that it would be great if he could. However, his words seemed to echo the inner struggle that no one could see hidden behind his outer calm. The girl with long blonde hair sighed heavily, her shoulders drooping, her eyes full of regret. She admitted it. A complete failure. Soon she found herself on the floor, going over her mistakes in her head. Her heart aching with shame, she insulted her father, burst into tears, hugged him, and couldn't even say what she really wanted. Sitting on the bed, hugging a pillow, the beauty stared thoughtfully into space. She truly believed her father had changed because of her, that she was the cause of his coldness and distance, but a feeling of uncertainty persisted. Something told her it wasn't just her, and this fear gradually enveloped her mind. Her father stood in front of her, puzzled, clearly trying to hide something important. His reaction made it clear that it wasn't about her screaming, but he couldn't explain it. The girl raised her head and looked at him carefully, not understanding why her father was so scared. Perhaps everything was much more complicated than she thought, and her father struggled with his inner doubts, unable to find the words. Tears glistened in her eyes when she thought that her father was still worried about her. But then indignation boiled up inside her. If he was worried, then why was he avoiding her anger? And disappointment filled her little heart. She called him a fool, not understanding why her father did not want to meet her. If he was so worried, these conflicting feelings did not give her peace. Lying on the bed, she felt a heavy feeling of guilt fill her heart. The thought that perhaps she was the fool did not leave her. Her own actions running away, leaving her father alone, now seemed like a mistake. If she had not run away, everything could have been different. This thought tormented her, making her feel even worse. The girl jumped out of bed, trying to calm her panic. Only one thought was spinning in her head. Her father's health was the most important thing. Now she firmly decided that she had to do everything possible to get him out of bed. Excitement filled her heart, but she knew that she could not give up, even if it was difficult. Sitting at the table, she clutched the pen in her hand, the thought of her emotions choking her, preventing her from saying a word, taking over her mind. But tears were no excuse for inaction. She decided, if she couldn't say it out loud, then perhaps it would be better to write everything that had been troubling her heart for so long. Writing would become her voice when words refused to come. Her thoughts began to clear up, and her first decision was to lock the bedroom door. Everything that could happen behind those doors seemed unpredictable to her. She tried to control at least this small part of her life. Looking at the window, she reminded herself, half an hour of sunlight a day and 2 walks her new regime. She realizes that she can't hesitate. A plan appears in her head, but there is a weak point in it. She can't trust Keanu if she tells him this. He will surely tell her father everything. The girl begins to run quickly. Her small feet silently touch the floor. She is afraid, but determination leads her forward, and she hopes for the best solution. They stand in the corridor together. A man and a maid are talking, unaware that a little girl is watching them. He notices with a smile that a mouse is wandering around the mansion, hinting at her presence. But she freezes, holding her breath, feeling her heart squeeze with fear, because she cannot be noticed. A little girl peeks cautiously around the corner, eavesdropping on the conversation, her thoughts preoccupied with the fact that the house is desperately short-staffed, and there's nothing she can do about it. Even the owner wearily pondering the problems with hiring and paying half-jokingly remarks that they'll soon have to get a cat to solve the mice problem. The little girl looks forward with a serious look, her violet eyes reflecting worries. Anxious thoughts are spinning in her head. It is obvious that the Solgren's family is in the worst situation. Her mind is busy thinking about the difficulties hanging over the house, which makes her feel the burden of responsibility for the future of the family. Vast tracts of land in the north belong to this family, but increasingly financial difficulties are beginning to threaten their holdings. Problems with transportation and a harsh climate make farming difficult. A cart with workers slowly descends the slope, carrying a rare harvest. The future of these lands is increasingly clouded by uncertainty and anxiety about how to cope with the difficulties. Most of the mines that provide the family with income are controlled by the imperial family, which complicates matters. They are managed by the emperor's half-brother, whose influence extends far and wide. This state of affairs creates even more uncertainty because he can intervene at any time and change the fate of their holdings, increasing anxiety about the future. The thoughts were filled with anxiety. If an avalanche were to occur this winter, the consequences would be catastrophic. Human casualties would be inevitable, the roads would freeze, and the north would be completely cut off from the outside world until the arrival of spring. This thought was oppressive, creating a feeling of imminent danger hanging over the entire region. Dark shadows fall upon the majestic building, reflecting gloomy thoughts about the future. The family's financial situation is inexorably worsening, and this seems an inevitable outcome. The palace stands gloomy, like a symbol of impending disasters that are getting closer. With each passing day, an oppressive anxiety hangs in the air, and the prospects become ever bleaker. The maiden looked ahead, her eyes full of determination and slight anxiety. Thoughts about the future did not leave her. She realized that the family's financial difficulties could only be prevented in one way. To do this, she needed to master the art of managing the winter branch. Time was playing against her, but she knew the fate of the family was in her hands. The main character also remained standing behind the wall. She understands that her father will never allow her to do what she has planned, and this makes her even sadder. Her thoughts were immersed in anxiety, realizing the inevitable resistance. Belgren, observing calmly, offers a solution. She will make sure that the servants clean more often. Frowning slightly, the young man turns his attention to his interlocutor and suddenly asks what she was doing. The embarrassed girl, her eyes wide in surprise, replies with noticeable panic that she ended up in the bathroom by accident. Her confusion betrays her lack of understanding of what is happening, which only adds to the comical nature of the situation. Kian, slightly bowing his head confidently, answers the question of how he learned the truth. He serenely states that being a creature of another race, nothing can escape his attention. The beauty listens to him, attentively surprised at how easily he guessed. Embarrassment gives way to a smile when she agrees with his words. Because all this is really true. The girl happily hands Belgren a small object, asking him to give it to her father. Her eyes sparkle with enthusiasm. She is sure that this is important. Kian looks at her with curiosity and slight bewilderment, asking what this thing is. He bows his head, trying to understand the meaning of this order, but is ready to fulfill the request. The little lady handed over the letter, holding it carefully in her hands, and asked Kian to take it to his father. When the man, with slight surprise in his voice, asked what kind of letter it was, she smiled naively and replied that he should not read it but simply pass it on. The beauty, despite the seriousness of the situation, could not resist a slight smile, expecting the gray-haired man to fulfill her request without further questions. Rasher slowly approached the massive door, his hand on the handle as if he was about to open it. The girl remained behind him, curiously watching his every move. She imagined what his face would look like if the door actually opened. This thought brought a slight smile to her face, because she had already expected it to be funny, adding a bit of irony to the moment. The beauty thoughtfully puts her hand to her forehead, as if trying to find a way out of the situation. A thought flashes through her mind. After all, there is nothing strange in asking to go out into the fresh air for the sake of health. She sincerely hopes that they will help her, understanding that with the state of his heart, there is no time to delay. Her gaze is lowered, expressing slight fatigue, but inside her a desire to help burns. The main character looks up with an anxious but determined expression, her head filled with thoughts of the future as she wonders, what if I solve the problem with the family's financial situation? At this moment, her mind is filled with uncertainty, but deep down hope grows that she can find a solution. A gentle hand squeezes someone else's hand, as if she is looking for support to take an important step. It's clear that to confront the emperor, it's necessary to develop a clear plan of action. The young man understands that the first step must necessarily be strengthening power in their territories. Without this, further struggle will be futile. He is determined to achieve the best result in order to ensure success. In addition, she understands that in the event of an unexpected outbreak of war, food supplies will be extremely necessary. It is important to take care of this in advance. So now, in this situation, funds become more important than ever. The girl slowly walks down the hallway, thinking about the current problems. First, they need to earn money. She understands that their house needs urgent repairs because the building is starting to fall apart. It also becomes clear to her that one doctor is not enough for her father. They need to find someone else who can help improve his conditions. With a serious expression on her face, she thinks about the financial situation. She needs to find out what the debts are in their territories, and she understands that the key to solving the problem may be in her father's office. Perhaps all the financial reports are stored there that will help clarify the situation and find a way out. The girl anxiously thinks about whether she can ask Kiane to show her the financial reports. She is almost sure that he will refuse, because they contain records of a recent incident. Embarrassment and fear make her think about what to do next, because she understands that this is important information for the salvation of their possessions. Clutching her hand resolutely, the little girl realized that she couldn't just give up. A desire to do something more flashed in her eyes despite all the obstacles. She firmly decided that she would find a moment when Kiana was not around to carry out her plan. Her resolve strengthened, and she was ready to take action for the future of her family. In a spacious living room, two men sit at a massive table surrounded by luxurious interiors. One of them, focused, asked about the purpose of the visit, carefully studying his interlocutor, Mr. Ross. Their conversation, imbued with formality, indicates the importance of the meeting, where every detail matters, and the outcome of their conversation can influence further events. Rickson, the head of the northern branch of the Fourth Imperial Trading Firm, looks forward with confidence and calm as he speaks of his intention to speed up the repayment of the debt. His gray hair and formal suit emphasize solidity and experience. He clearly knows what he wants, and his goals are crystal clear. His gaze is focused. The gesture of his hand adds weight to his words. A man with a stern expression stares intently at his interlocutor. His gaze is penetrating, as if trying to discern his guest's true intentions. He also notes that the visit was unannounced, which arouses his suspicion. As he asks his question, he clearly seeks to discover the real reason for the visit, preparing for any possible scenario. The old man looks ahead with a serious expression, his eyes hidden behind the lenses of his glasses. Thoughts pulsing in his head, he considers that the words that have just been spoken could be careless for the one who helped destroy the estate. There is a heaviness in his voice when he mentions the incident with the Brontes family, knowing that this is the beginning of a more serious conversation. After his death, many events began to unfold rapidly. Several Solgren's businesses that had once thrived under his management began to lose their stability. Financial instability became increasingly palpable, and in the background, only scattered documents and coins could be seen, symbolizing chaos and decay. Ross had invested heavily in Bronte's beet-growing project, hoping for a steady profit. But as the situation began to deteriorate, he could no longer simply watch from the sidelines. The economic difficulties associated with the project began to mount, threatening the entire system in which his efforts and capital had been invested. The character watches with bewilderment as the old man suddenly insists on speeding up the repayment of his debts. He could not have imagined that this topic would be the motive for his visit. Reasoning to himself, he notes that growing beets is only possible in the spring, and does not understand why he is rushing with this issue now when the right time for planting has not yet arrived. Rickson rises heavily from the table, trying to explain the need to speed up the repayment of debts. He knows that Bronte's store will sell beets until August next year, and it was for this profit that they invested in the project. But something bothers him, and he is not sure that things will go as planned. The man carefully placed his hand on a stack of documents, moving them closer to his interlocutor. His calm voice indicated the importance of the papers he was offering. He said that it would be much easier if he himself verified all the information. It was clear that words might not convey the full essence of the situation, and only facts on paper could finally clarify the picture. Now, taking the paper, Kian is deep in thought. He was handed a special agreement, the text of which makes him doubt his gaze is focused, and he understands that this could be something serious. He turns the sheet and reads, "If the Brontes' business collapses, the repayment date of the debt will be changed by the investor Ross." Every line on the document sounded like a trick, and now he was faced with an important choice. Rickson, leaning back in his chair, explains the situation with cold calm, his voice firm as he reminds them that his company has invested a huge amount of money in this project, and the loss of such capital is unacceptable for the Fourth Imperial Trading Company. It is important for him to save the company's face, and this becomes a priority in their future actions. A fireplace burns in the quiet, spacious room, filling it with a soft glow. The phrase spoken with a hint of cold calculation sounds like a warning. An important guest will arrive next March, and a decision must be made without error. He makes it clear that it will be better for everyone if everything is resolved correctly and on time, hinting at the possible consequences of errors. The Duchess suddenly flinches when she hears words that are incomprehensible to her. Her hands rise in confusion, and her face reflects surprise and anxiety. She tries to comprehend what is happening. A piercing question sounds in her thoughts. What is he talking about? The situation clearly goes beyond her expectations, making her nervous. The beauty was looking for an opportunity to enter the office, planning every step. Suddenly noticing Kian leading the guest into the living room, she realized that this was her chance. Her heart began to beat faster. Now was the right moment to sneak in. Unnoticed, her decision was ripe. She needed to take advantage of the opportunity, while Rasher's attention was focused on the guest. The lady quickly realized that the moment for action had arrived unexpectedly quickly, but her thoughts were suddenly interrupted when she noticed Kian. Why he looked so tense. His frowning look and concentrated expression made her question now. Her determination was mixed with slight anxiety, because something was clearly bothering Kian. She carefully leaned against the wall of the next room, hoping to eavesdrop on the conversation. Luckily, no one noticed her presence. The fireplace blocked out sounds from other rooms, but one knocked-out brick created a weak sound bridge. She knew that this small defect would help her hear everything that was happening in the room. The main character stood on the balcony, deep in thought. Brontes had borrowed money, counting on future beetroot sales. But the March repayment deadline worried her. Plans for a way out of the situation were spinning in her head as time was running out. Her gaze was focused, and tension was growing inside. Her eyes were shining with the rush of thoughts, and looked away. Everything was happening too quickly. She knew that beets were not planted before May, which meant there was even less time left than she had expected. Her thoughts continued to spin, building up possible solutions, but anxiety had already taken root in her mind. Her thoughts drifted back to the past memories that she had heard before her rebirth surfaced. The beet planting project failed. The disease of overripeness destroyed all plans, and the farmer stood there full of disappointment, not knowing how to cope with the failure. This experience made her think about the present, because the mistakes of the past could be repeated. She held tightly to the edge, feeling the tension seeping into her fingers. The thought that the project would inevitably bring losses ran cold through her consciousness. Her mind, assessing the risks, saw how the situation was unfolding. For the worse, every step in this direction seemed increasingly risky to her, and the possible losses increasingly real. The girl stood, her eyes full of anxiety. The realization that there were too many debts that the family would not be able to pay off haunted the main character, making her heart beat faster. It seemed to her that time was short, and she needed to act immediately. Before Kian returned, determination flashed in her eyes. She understood that this was her chance to sort everything out before it was too late. The beauty moved quickly down the corridor, her determination growing stronger with every step. Time was against her, but she couldn't afford to stop clenching her fists. She decided to sneak into the archives and try to find countermeasures. This was her chance to fix the situation and help the family get out of the debt crisis. Opening the book, the girl could not contain herself, and her eyes widened in shock. On the pages in front of her was a huge debt. 4 million. She could not believe her eyes. This was not just a problem, but a real catastrophe for her family. The situation required an immediate solution, and panic began to grow in her chest. She sat staring at the page, realizing the scale of the disaster. The family's annual income was only 1 million, but their debt was 4 times. That her gaze grew heavy with the understanding of how they would ever get out of such a hole. Every figure on the document seemed to weigh heavily on her, emphasizing that the situation was almost hopeless. The main character leafed through the old records, relieved to realize that they hadn't gone bankrupt yet, but then something made her stop if she thought about it. Her eyes widened with sudden insight, her gaze previously thoughtful and tired, now filled with concentration. The thought appeared unexpectedly, like the key to solving the problem that had tormented her for so long. Keon continues to confidently manage the finances, taking the place of the ailing head of the family. His decisive actions and desire to support the family business cause surprise and admiration in the girl watching him. She cannot believe in his strength and abilities, realizing what an amazing person he truly is. The little girl sat on the floor among the books and reports laid out deep in thought. She looked at the documents with concern, calculating the amount. The thought flashed through her mind. By March, the Ross Company would need to return 500,000. Trying to contain her growing anxiety, she delved into the calculations again, trying to find a solution to this confusing situation. The blonde looked confidently forward, her eyes blazing with determination, and she had come to the conclusion that if they put in the effort, they could earn as much as they needed. There was no longer a trace of confusion on her face, only a firm intention to act and change the situation in their favor, despite all the difficulties. In the west of Belgoiton, among the green hills, there was a small village of Kampa. It became a haven for poor itinerant craftsmen who began to gather there one after another. Having learned about the weak collection of taxes, artisans and traders flocked here, hoping for a better future, creating their own autonomy. As time went on, the small village gradually grew. The painting depicts artisans passionate about their work, one creating a clay vessel, another painting. The place became a major city through which everyone who considered themselves a creator had to pass. A creative atmosphere filled the streets, turning the city into a cultural center. Not all the masters who settled in Kampa were able to achieve recognition. A young man with red hair stands in front of someone clearly surprised by the unexpected visit. His face expresses confusion and bewilderment, and in his voice there is hidden anxiety. He asks why the guests have come, not understanding their intentions. On the threshold of the house, the red-haired artist answers a visitor's question. The visitor standing before him clarifies whether he has come to the right place, the village of Senfilda. The girl confirms this, slightly surprised by the unexpected visit, but trying not to show embarrassment. The light of the morning sun softly illuminates the street and their faces, creating an atmosphere of calm dialogue. The redhead modestly admits that he does not consider himself a true master. His gaze is directed to the side, and there is a slight sadness and uncertainty in his voice. He says that he is just an apprentice who has no right to be called an artist. Words reflecting his doubts in his own abilities, despite the fact that he is perhaps much more talented than he himself believes. He still holds the letter in his hands, his gaze directed downwards towards the envelope, which he assumes contains an important message. He is surprised by the quality of the paper, thinking out loud that this must be a letter from a rich man, but who could send it? Uncertainty and curiosity are reflected in his eyes, making him think about the upcoming events. Hiding her excitement, the heroine held a letter with expensive paper in her hands. In the dim light of the lamp, his gaze lingered on the seal, a strange luxury for his usual surroundings. An inner voice told him that the letter came from an influential person because such paper could not belong to an ordinary person who could have sent it. The artist examined the letter in his hands with surprise, his thoughts racing. The handwriting was strange, almost childish, yet the vocabulary was distinctly aristocratic. He felt a slight unease, as it didn't match his expectations, and the faint rustling of paper underscored his confusion and bewilderment. An amazing material sparkled in his hands, a rare blue pigment used to create paints. The deep, vibrant color captivated his attention, seeming to pierce everything around with its purity and depth. Thoughts flashed through the artist's mind. This was a valuable gift, a rarity rarely encountered, a thing that made one feel amazed, a mixture of surprise and delight. Her eyes widened in surprise. She held in her hands a rare material that she had never seen before. Her head seemed to spin from the realization of the value of the pigment that was in front of it. She had never seen anything like it. Material of such a high class seemed out of reach for an ordinary artist. Excitement began to beat in her heart, mixed with trepidation at the opening possibilities. The red-haired girl, running from her spot, hurriedly catches up with the courier. Her voice echoes loudly down the street, causing him to turn around. She grabs his shoulder, almost screaming. Her eyes glow with bewilderment. "Where did this package come from?" Her voice trembled with excitement. The courier's answer could shed light on the unexpected arrival of the mysterious pigment that had so astonished him. The messenger calmly informs that the parcel arrived from the northern borders of Solgrens and was marked as something important, so they decided that everything should end exactly like this. The blonde sits by the window and watches the beautifully falling snowflakes, hoping that the parcel has already been delivered to its destination as expected. She does not intend to waste any time. Found exclusively in the Solgrens, the ghost stone was always considered useless. Its dull gray hue and seemingly complete lack of use made it unnoticed by most. But one talented artist saw something more in the stone. She transformed it into a rare and precious material for creating a unique paint. The mineral powder extracted from the ghost stone after being filtered and heated changed color, turning into a stunning phantom blue hue. This discovery became a milestone in the history of Bellroyton art, forever changing the world of painting and paint materials. The girl, with a satisfied expression on her face, blushed slightly, closed her eyes and folded her hands under her chin, her thoughts full of confidence. This time she simply sped up the process, a simple movement, but how much hidden joy from a small victory was in it. The geometric patterns in the background seemed to emphasize her inner harmony and satisfaction with the result of her action. The blonde sat thoughtfully at the table, wearily closing her eyes, as if immersed in deep thought. In the background, she sighed heavily, realizing that writing Lily's letter had taken much longer than expected. In front of her stood a beauty with a vase of flowers, her calm face expressing concern, and the flowers in her hands filled the room with a light aroma of freshness. The main character, wrapped in a warm cloak, stands by the window, her eyes thoughtfully looking into the distance, as if she is waiting for a long-awaited letter, anxiety in her soul. Perhaps the answer will come after winter? She tries to calm herself, thinking that the message will definitely arrive. But the wait has already become unbearable, and the cold winter air penetrating through the crack in the window only increases her anxiety. Sylvia was the first to discover the amazing phantom blue color that changed the course of art history. The stone from which this rare pigment was mined was valuable only to her, and she turned it into materials to create the paint that brought her recognition. The woman always had a passion for drawing, which remained with her despite difficulties. Even without earning money from open color, she did not abandon her calling and continued to devote herself to creativity, finding solace and meaning in life in it. The beauty created her masterpiece, calling it Dawn of Kampa. The painting depicting the morning city in rays of soft light became her debut work. Every stroke conveyed deep feelings and the tender atmosphere of her native place. But despite her efforts and skill, she had to realize that the true assessment of her work was still ahead. Sylvia's happiness proved short-lived. The teacher who was supposed to support her, unexpectedly, took away her right to use paint, which meant everything to her. This blow was too strong for her fragile soul, and unable to cope with the cruel reality, she decided to end her life, leaving the world of her creativity forever. The blonde standing by the window gazed thoughtfully into the distance, her gaze full of melancholy and hidden questions. The painting, Dawn of Kampa, which had become a masterpiece, would forever remain an artistic legacy. However, the thought of the price at which this had been achieved haunted her. A realization was dawning in her soul that behind great achievements, there is always someone's sacrifice. And this time, it would save an unrecognized genius who deserved it. Solgren Jr. looked thoughtfully out the window, remembering a moment from her past life when she saw a painting that left a lasting impression on her. It was the Empress's, and now her thoughts returned to that moment again. She wondered if she would ever be able to look at this masterpiece again, because the painting was truly unique and enchanting. The servant immersed in her reading suddenly looked up at a slight rustling sound. Her eyes widened, and she quietly asked, "Who's there?" A girl with long blonde hair stood frozen in the corner of the room, hidden behind the window. Her heart began to beat faster when she realized that Lily had noticed her presence. Thoughts quickly flashed through her head. Perhaps this is a reply from Kampa, or from Dad if he read my note. Her heart instantly began to beat faster. Hopes were replaced by anxiety. A sudden noise made her shudder. The stairs creaked and the door opened with unexpected force. The woman, shocked, stopped, not daring to move, but ready to meet the one who disturbed their peace. A man in a military uniform with red hair looks around in confusion, not understanding what is happening. Someone's hand touches her shoulder, making her wonder what is going on. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, a young girl with silver hair excitedly tells the maid Belgren that some strangers have appeared in their house. Concern is conveyed in her tone, and she waits for an answer. A maid with long blonde hair neatly braided folds her hands shyly, looking ahead. Her calm voice breaking the silence, she reports that the Duke has ordered knights to be provided for protection. She adds with confidence that most likely these are the ones sent for this important task. The maiden looks forward with obvious surprise on her face. Her violet eyes wide open, and her thoughts are filled with anxiety. She is confused. They already have few knights. Why should she hire them too? The question worries her, because the situation seems more and more confusing, and she tries to find meaning in it. The pyramids symbolize the hierarchy, with knights at the top, demanding higher pay than the common soldiers below. And the small figures of people inside the pyramid emphasize this difference. Year after year, financial difficulties affected the army, and that is why there were so few knights in the unit. The girl stands thoughtfully, her hand to her chin, thinking about the security situation. It is obvious that the level of protection was lowered, and there are clearly not enough guards. A light knock on the door interrupts her thoughts. A polite voice makes a proposal. "Duchess, if you do not mind, may we meet?" The blonde beauty stands thoughtfully, noticing the obvious. The security level has clearly been lowered, and there aren't enough knights. She's trying to consider what to do next when there's a knock at the door. She's interrupted by an offer to meet, and she turns around with obvious interest. A silhouette flickers in the doorway, and the girl prepares for a new acquaintance, perhaps with the protectors they've sent her. A purple-haired knight, clad in a white and blue uniform, drops to one knee, placing his hand over his heart in a sign of loyalty and respect, his face focused and serious, as he discreetly introduces himself as Lola Clore, the leader of the Solgren's White Knights, bringing the moment of important introduction closer. The main character looks thoughtfully at Lola. Clore, remembering this name, she feels that she has heard this name somewhere before, but cannot immediately remember in what context. Her gaze is full of slight anxiety and curiosity. As if this fact could be important to her, the lady continues to stand in front of her, unaware of her inner doubts. The knights introduced, at the moment when the winter cold is approaching, do not inspire confidence in the heroine. She watches them closely, hiding her excitement behind a mask of calm uncertainty reflected in her eyes. Their presence seems to her more a means of observation than protection. With the thought of upcoming events, she could not get rid of suspicions. The two stand side by side, discussing what is happening. One of them, with a serious expression, notes that Mr. Chien carefully selected the staff for a specific reason, hinting at the importance of their presence here. The second, clearly surprised, remarks that he expected a different attitude, believing that nice things do not arouse the interest of the interlocutor. One of the assembled men calmly looks at the stage before him, his gaze directed at the girl standing next to his comrade, who sarcastically asks if young girls are always so small by nature, and how they can be so cleverly embarrassing. However, the knight with purple hair stops his abruptness, pointing out, Don't be rude to the Lady J. Lola, usually reserved and calm, stands next to two other knights, watching what is happening. His comrade holding the red-haired knight by the neck says with undisguised mockery that today it was his turn to guard. He adds that this knight recently joined the order, and therefore he still has many shortcomings. The purple-haired knight looks sternly at the assembled group and warns them, if the newly arrived knight starts behaving rudely, they should report it to him immediately. The girl replies with a smile that everything is clear, while the red-haired knight stands nearby, seemingly avoiding direct eye contact so as not to show his embarrassment. The red-headed man asks the leader, with a slight panic, if they don't trust him, taking a step back and visibly getting nervous. In response, the purple-haired knight calmly replies that Mr. Kyan has the same opinion. Tension reigns in the room despite the light tone of the phrase, and it feels like everyone here is keeping their emotions under control. The gentleman, along with the other knights, bowed, before leaving, saying goodbye to the mistress. He was calm, but there was a certain tension in his voice when he wished her a wonderful day under the protection of the veil. Only a slight echo of his footsteps remained in the room as he respectfully nodded again in farewell. The Duchess looked closely at Sir Jay, asking an unexpected question about his race. She could not help but notice that he was different from other people, and her intuition told her so. The man was slightly surprised by her observation, but smiled, acknowledging her insight. He did not expect such a keen attention to his nature, but was ready to answer. She stopped looking thoughtfully ahead, confidence growing inside her. Even if no one noticed, she felt that she knew the truth. The White Order was surrounded by secrets, and intuition told her that its members mostly belonged to a different race. This is how the lady was able to understand the most important thing. She could not explain how she came to this conclusion, but this feeling did not leave her alone. As is well known, this race is stronger than humans. They are different in many ways. They easily accomplish even the most difficult tasks. Their natural strength arouses envy, and this is why they are often disliked. Despite this, they continue to confidently carry out their work, as if not noticing the ill will of others. As is well known, only in the north is preference given to another race different from humans. In the distance, a majestic city surrounded by cold walls, as if a reminder of the strict traditions of the northern lands. People around are busy with their own affairs, but the atmosphere clearly emphasizes the difference in status and perception of this unusual race. Her thoughts were filled with strange guesses. Knights and another race, it reminded her of something, but the memories were slipping away. She lowered her gaze to the interlocutor, a little thoughtfully, plunging into her thoughts. The knight interrupted her silence with a gentle reminder, addressing her to bring her out of her thoughts and return to reality. The boy knelt before the girl, his eyes slightly narrowed, as if asking a riddle. His face lit up with a sly smile as he asked, smiling, what kind of beast's blood could be found in his veins. The girl hesitated slightly, uncertain whether she should guess or whether this was another joke. A slight nervousness was evident on her face, but she decided to answer. The red-haired man, in a burst of enthusiasm, leaned toward the girl and asked a cryptic question about what kind of animal's blood flowed through his veins. The blonde tensed, not knowing how to answer, because the answer obviously required a guess. Despite her doubts, her gaze showed interest, but also a bit of embarrassment. The scene was filled with a slight playfulness, creating an atmosphere of friendly challenge. A few days passed, and the atmosphere in the room became more homely and relaxed. A small group had gathered on the carpet in front of the table. Jay, sitting on the floor, held several cards in his hands, with a slight smile offering them for selection. He looked confidently at the girl who was watching him with genuine curiosity. The man holds the cards in his hands, his expression full of excited anticipation. For some reason, he offers to make a choice, showing the cards to his interlocutor. She pulls out a card with the Joker on it, and this causes her obvious confusion. The girl holds her head while the man begins to laugh, joking about the fact that her intuition always leads to choosing this card. The hero, clearly pleased with himself, laughingly points to his win in the game, explaining that the victory is his, and therefore the heroine will not go to the Duke's room. The girl sits on the floor with a sad expression on her face, justifying that she simply made a mistake. She is clearly upset by her failure, and cards are scattered around her, symbolizing an unsuccessful move. The situation evokes a slightly ironic atmosphere in everyone. Sitting in a chair with knitting in her hands, the maid calmly observes what is happening, barely suppressing a slight smile. She reminds the heroine that it would be worth paying attention to strategic moves, as if the card game were a gambit in response. The heroine irritably asks not to laugh, assuring that this is not chess. The ironic remark of the maid only emphasizes her calm against the background of general merriment. The little heroine sat thoughtfully fiddling with her dress and wondering why she hadn't been able to get into her father's room for several days now. Her large violet eyes were full of worry. Her recent attempts to get closer to the door had been unsuccessful, and something inside told her that the reason for this was much deeper than a simple lack of time. The young man in the blue uniform looking down says that the girl is not allowed to enter the Duke's room. His face maintains a neutral expression, but there is a certain severity in his tone. The Duchess, looking up at him in confusion, does not understand what is happening, and asks why she is forbidden. The young man, without changing his tone, calmly explains that this is an order from his lordship, adding weight to his words. Every day she tried to get into the room, but she always met a Luan on her way. He always caught her before she could get close. Despite this, the girl did not give up, and again tried to get around the knight, but none of her attempts were successful. After numerous failures, Jed offered her to play a game, in the hope that it would amuse the little girl and dilute the atmosphere. The hero, trying to offer at least some kind of game to dispel boredom and distract from the constant attempts to penetrate the Duke's room, offered a deal. If the girl won at least once at cards, he would let her go there for a short time. She looked at him with apprehension, wondering what would happen if she lost. Jed smiled slyly, holding the cards in his hands, as if anticipating a funny outcome. The girl, not losing hope of meeting the Duke, takes a decisive step. The conditions of the game are simple. If she loses, she will have to stop trying to see him. She boldly agrees, assuring that she will not lose, the man squinting. Slyly makes a deal, preparing for another game. At this moment, she begins to realize that this night is not as simple as he seems. The little girl, filled with regret and remorse, stood with a gloomy face. She remembered how Jed the knight turned out to be a master at card games, and this fact upset her terribly, even though she made a mistake with the winter branch. But this game was too much for her. Her face turned red, and she clenched her fists, unable to withstand the emotions that rolled over her. The girl was on the verge of despair. Anger was building up inside her. She thought about how her father had not answered her note, which tormented her even more. The heroine felt how the world around her was becoming dark and disturbing. Jed stood next to her, watching how she was experiencing this moment. The thought sounded in the girl's head that she had already suffered enough, and this added even more pain to her. Solgren Jr. rushed forward, resolutely, not wanting to wait any longer, and determined to see her father. Despite the obstacles, she no longer heard objections. Only the noise in her ears and the pounding of her own heart walking quickly along the corridor. She suddenly stopped looking at the details déjà vu. It seemed she had seen the hanging sleeve before, but she could not remember when exactly. The Duchess, her eyes wide in surprise, took a step forward, holding on to the hem of her dress. An unexpected thought flashed through her mind, which did not give her peace. She looked up and, a little confused, asked Jed if there was a knight in the order who had lost his left arm. This question came to her suddenly, as if it contained some important clue. The friend, after thinking for a moment, ran his hand over his chin, trying to remember if there was anything similar. But his face remained puzzled. He replied that he did not remember a knight without a left hand, and also noted that it was difficult for a person without a hand to wield a sword, and that such cases were also not encountered among other races. The little heroine frowned, trying to recall details from the past. Her hands clenched, and her eyes showed alarm. She was sure that she had seen a knight without a left hand, but for some reason the memories were blurry. The thoughts did not give her peace, and she quietly whispered to herself that she definitely remembered him, although now it seemed strange and inappropriate. The girl, frowning slightly, asks Jed what date it is today. He answers with a slight smile that today is the 30th, And tomorrow, the harsh winter month, will begin. The calm and confident tone softened her anxiety a little. But the approaching winter still brought with it a feeling of anxiety and anticipation of something new and inevitable. A young aristocrat stands by the window, peering intently into the snowstorm beyond. She suddenly realizes that an important event must happen today and not tomorrow. As she previously thought, she clearly remembers that a little boy loses his sister and left arm in a battle with monsters. This moment occurs before the rebirth that changes his life forever. The girl, full of memories of the past, looked out the window, realizing the importance of this day. It was the day of Asiligo's arrival in their house, an event that changed many things. Her gaze was serious and full of emotions, while she, continuing her usual activities, asked Belgrin to bring warm boots, preparing for a possible meeting, or perhaps a new test. All that remains is to anxiously ask the maid if she wants to go outside, not hiding her anxiety. Lily decisively confirms that she does, and hurries her, reminding her that time is short. Then Jed intervenes, raising his voice authoritatively, forbidding them to go out. The words sound stern and categorical, and the maid only freezes next to him, embarrassed and confused. The caregiver draws attention to the approaching snowstorm with alarm. His voice is serious and insistent. He explains that the snowstorm is so strong that even people like the man will not be able to move normally on the street. His face expresses concern, and his gestures reinforce the feeling of impending danger that requires immediate action. The beauty looks at her mistress with concern. Expressing concern for her safety, she asks how a little girl like her mistress could decide to go out in such weather. Her voice filled with panic and her face expressing anxiety. The lady tries to understand why her mistress needed to go out, asking first to explain the reason for such a hasty decision. The lady whispers excitedly, her face expressing extreme concern. Her gaze focused and filled with anxiety. She understands that time is running out, and every second counts. The thought flashes through her head. They are in danger. An unexpected situation requires immediate action, and she feels that she is obliged to act quickly to save those who need her help. Standing in front of Jed and Lily, the lady realizes that she made a mistake by expressing her concern too strongly when they ask who she meant. She presses her lips together silently, scolding herself for her haste. The knight looks at her with slight surprise. While Belgrin is worried, the thought sounds in the lady's head that she was overexcited. The girl hesitated, trying to remember what she had just said. Thoughts about the victims were still spinning in her head, but she did not immediately understand the situation. Gradually, it dawned on her that she needed to act. The couple watched her determination to help in surprise, and the man in white noticed her impulse and remarked that she was truly unusual. Lily tries to reassure the Duchess, pointing out that security measures have already been taken. She smiles reservedly, emphasizing that movement at the posts has long been restricted. The guards are actively searching for victims. Security has been strengthened at the borders, and there is no unnecessary cause for concern. The main character, with her head bowed, understands that the measures taken are insufficient. Her gaze is directed into the distance, but disturbing thoughts do not leave her. The guards are searching only the areas around the posts and the lands that have been cleared. This makes her uneasy. She realizes that danger may still be lurking in other places. Jed looked closely at the blonde, his brows slightly furrowed. Her suggestion to convey instructions to the guards to search more thoroughly caught him off guard. He tilted his head in slight bewilderment, trying to understand her motives. The girl looked determined, but when he asked why, she seemed thoughtful, as if she had to explain something obvious. Looking at the hero, the little girl couldn't control how her big purple eyes filled with anxiety. Her words sounded incoherent, but determined. Something was bothering her. She didn't want anyone to get hurt, clenching her hands into fists. She tried to explain why this was worrying her so much, although she herself didn't fully understand what exactly was causing her this feeling of anxiety. He watches her, noticing how she suddenly loses her composure. Thoughts rush through his head. What could have alarmed her so much at this time? The hero suggests using an owl to send a message, although he is not sure whether the bird will be able to cope with the bad weather. Nevertheless, he decides to try, because the message needs to be sent to the nearest security post, despite all the obstacles. Beauty clenches her fist, clearly realizing her mistake. Thoughts of what she could have done differently do not leave her if she knew other ways to deal with the winter branch. Perhaps everything would have been different now. This burden lies heavily on her shoulders, and she blames herself for not taking action earlier. She stood there lost in thought, even though her heart was yearning to go outside. Common sense told her it was too dangerous to go out. Now the snowstorm was getting worse, and the situation outside was only getting worse. She understood that a burst of emotion could cost her too much, and now it was important to exercise caution, despite the anxiety in her soul. The Duchess stood by the window, thinking about the lack of people in such weather. Jed could go and catch the demonic beasts himself, but even his efforts would not be enough. She was worried about whether they would be able to properly organize the search in such bad weather. The lack of manpower at such a time created additional difficulties, and she was worried that everything would go wrong. In a past life, Asiligo lay dying near a lake, and that moment remained in his memory, haunting his thoughts. Knights returning from their posts found him and others lying on the cold ground. The wind whistled in the night, snow flurries surrounded the scene, giving it an ominous and tragic tone. The light of the torch in the knight's hands only partially illuminated the dark picture of the past that would never leave him. There were no more beds left in the hospitals, and Evan, realizing the gravity of the situation, decided to take responsibility. He brought the injured children to the mansion to treat them himself, knowing that they would have a difficult and long road ahead of them to survive. Clutching the fabric of her dress with excitement, the beauty realized that her fingers were shaking from the tension. Her thoughts were revolving around one idea. They should be close by now. Her heart was pounding loudly in her chest. Every moment of waiting seemed like an eternity. Her determination was growing stronger. With every second, she knew that she could not afford to be late if she wanted to help. The girl held the branch in her hands with difficulty, which seemed to her to be disproportionately heavy. She looked at it with bewilderment, wondering if this branch had a way to reduce its size, because it was almost impossible to carry it. Stubbornness was visible in her gaze, but also slight irritation that magic did not make the task easier. Memories of how that day she heard an unknown voice whispering that in order to use the branch, it was necessary to open a certain door floated through her mind. This strange message made her think, because the meaning remained unclear. A slight anxiety filled her consciousness again, and she tried to remember more details about those events. The girl stands in front of a closed door, thinking hard that if she opens it, she can use a winter branch to stop the frost. Her gaze is focused, and determination is visible in her eyes. She clenches her fists, gathering her strength, and says to herself that she will try again. Inner excitement and readiness to act is reflected on her face despite her doubts. The man walks slowly along the snowy road, his feet sinking into the snow. He calls out to Kana, asking if she is sleeping, and urges her not to fall asleep, asking her to wake up. His steps are heavy but determined. He encourages her, saying that they are almost there and will soon be able to stop the snowfall around. Seems endless, and the fight against fatigue is becoming more and more difficult. Through the howling snow, a light gradually appears before them. One of them points forward. A speaking voice rings out through the ice storm, promising that they are almost there. This place promised them shelter, despite fatigue, weakness, and cold. They tried to stay on their feet. The thought that these lands accept everyone, regardless of race, gave them hope. At that moment, Aesel looked ahead, unable to hold back his tears. His mother's words echoed in his head, words that stayed with him forever. Her reminder was simple, but filled with heaviness. To take care of his sister, even when she was no longer around, the boy's heart sank with fear and responsibility that he now carried despite the fact that he was still a child. The boy ran through the snowstorm, barely keeping his balance on the slippery snow. The cold pierced his bones, but the thought that he had to protect his sister gave him strength. He was full of determination. To get to a safe place where Kana could be protected, he just had to hold on a little longer, although the wind was getting stronger and the path was becoming more and more difficult. Through the howling snow, they appear creatures emitting menacing roars, like the stuff of nightmares. She presses closer, trying to protect those around her, their muscular bodies and red eyes glittering in the moonlight, reflecting off the snowstorms. Fear grips her heart, but she holds on, sensing the impending danger. Assel hugs his sister tightly, standing in the middle of a furious snowstorm. There is only one decision in his head. He must protect her at any cost. All his thoughts are focused on saving her from the threat. But suddenly, something incomprehensible unfolds before his eyes. He is puzzled, not understanding what happened. Bright, glowing butterflies are circling in front of him, surrounded by the gentle glow of dawn. The boy, with his eyes closed, realizes that he has died. His thoughts rush through his mind, leaving a feeling of strange calm. A stomping sound is heard next to him. He opens his eyes and sees the source of the sound. Although he thinks it is a two-legged demon, fatigue gives way to relief when the heroine says that he finally found them. The girl, surrounded by bright rays of light, looks at the stranger in surprise when he asks who she is. A small child with bright purple eyes looks at the hero with concern, illuminated by a soft light. Her voice sounds worried. Is she okay? Hoping that no one is hurt. The voice is full of delight when the little girl realizes that she has succeeded. The stick has noticeably grown. It's a little strange. Now she could do it herself. The voice remained in her head. Quiet but full of confidence, she understood that this moment had come. She had to act. Her dress flutters softly. The white fabrics contrast with the darkness around her. And in her hand, she holds a branch glowing with magic. The same stranger repeats confidently, "They have already spoken several times. It is time to stop being afraid." She thought, listening to the very voice that always helped her. But now the heroine decides to ask a question. Who is this mysterious interlocutor, and how does he penetrate her mind, appearing precisely at such moments? The questions mount, but she is still ready to listen further. Ice patterns sparkled around her, reminding her of the power she had accidentally summoned. The subtle, almost fragile, yet so powerful connections to magic now seeming obvious. The girl sits on the floor, surrounded by old books and manuscripts, leafing through the pages. With interest, she wonders why the records say nothing about what she encountered. A strange voice responds to her thoughts, noting that it has never communicated with a person before, and wonders how such a thing could be in the records. The main character recalls being told that spirits are always friendly to people, but her recent experience makes her doubt this. This has never happened. In ancient times, the goddess Shaya created spirits on earth, mysterious creatures to protect her land from demons born of darkness. These creatures became important guardians of balance and light. Spirits have the unique ability to enter into an agreement with a person to help him in his needs and affairs. This union strengthens the connection between the worlds. The heroine is surprised she has never heard that the spirit of the Winter Branch can sign a contract with the Solgrens. She wonders why the spirit spoke to her. The little beauty doesn't understand what obate means, but the internal dialogue continues to sound in her head. With curiosity and caution, she suggests calling her interlocutor Winter, hoping that this will help establish contact with the spirit she just met. A mysterious voice warns Every about the power of names, acknowledging that the suggested name is suitable, but advising her not to speak it, as names have far more power than she can imagine. The spirit explains to the girl that if she calls him Winter, he will take the corresponding form, but he warns that this is difficult to understand, and it is better not to try. The voice asked the girl what creature was the most fragile. She thought for a moment, and answered, "A butterfly." Her gaze was full of innocent curiosity. The stranger thought it was a good name, and the girl squeezed his hand slightly, as if she sensed something important at that moment. As if the name had revealed something new to her, the voice gently asked her to open her eyes, assuring her that it had found the right form for her. The main character narrowed her eyes, clearly not expecting such words, but curiosity flickered in her gaze. A butterfly, shrouded in a bright glow, hovers before the girl, who is delighted by her beauty. The beauty reverently calls her Lady Winter, but the spirit protests, reminding her, "From now on, call me whatever you want." The blonde's voice sounds apologetic for the way she addressed him, and she asks why it became cold, with her appearance feeling that it is unnatural, and gives her a strange feeling. The branch emitting a cold glow, the stranger explains to her that her body feels discomfort because it has a limit on how much it can withstand the embodiment of the butterfly's power. The girl looked intently at the glowing butterfly. Her thoughts had only one desire: to stop the storm and save people. She knew that for this, she needed help. The heroine extended her hand, inviting the girl to follow her. The time had come to fulfill her wish, which would remain quite simple. Smiling with relief, the Duchess felt glad that she had made it in time. The sun's rays illuminated her face, reflecting a feeling of gratitude and lightness. The young man looks at his new acquaintance with confusion, realizing that her skin is cold as ice. Panic arises in his head. How to cope with this surprise and help two people at once when they are in such a state. The sun's rays softly illuminated the snow-covered fields. People walked ahead, carrying the last of their supplies. In the distance, a woman exclaimed that there were still children left here besides the mistress. The young man looks at the girl, barely containing his embarrassment, hugging her to himself, and the realization comes that she is an aristocrat, and thanks to her, they are both still alive. The doctor, with towels in his hands, bows his head and answers the question of when the Duke will appear. Lily says that Hervin will soon be informed of what happened, and he will arrive. The heroine lies on the bed, covered with a checkered blanket, shivering from the cold. She struggles with all her might to fight off exhaustion, feeling that now she feels several times heavier than after the battle. The Duchess still doesn't get up, trying to convince herself that everything is okay. Despite the cold and weakness, she is proud that she saved others with the power of the winter branch. A confident inner voice sounds, emphasizing the importance of care and protection. The patron reminds of his responsibility, promising to properly protect his ward. The stranger sounds with a hint of regret, claiming that it is not an illness, but alas, it is impossible to destroy the shell. The girl, perplexed, asks if the interlocutor knows anything about her father's illness. A man with a worried expression on his face orders Evan to move the heater closer to the bed, while an exhausted girl lies next to him, needing warmth. Solgren Sr. looked at him with a worried look, ordering hot water to be brought immediately. His voice was insistent. There was no time for delay. The girl recalled her father's words, warning her not to use the winter branch, and a feeling of guilt settled in her heart, because she had disobeyed and was now worried about his condition. Looking with a drop of concern, the hero assures that he has collected all the heaters of the castle, and it will soon get warmer. The girl, tired, slept quietly, her face expressing peace. The little girl in his arms realized that she had to apologize to her father. Her face showed deep regret. Meanwhile, someone nearby noticed that her body temperature was gradually decreasing, which was an alarming sign. The man holds his daughter tightly in his arms. Her face has turned slightly pale. He asks to bring more wood for the fireplace. The servant promises to fill her with warm water, caring about her well-being. With anxiety in his eyes, the hero prays that his actions will work. He is tense, beads of sweat on his face reflect his inner excitement and hope for a positive outcome. The main character tries to keep herself under control despite the icy cold penetrating her body. She does not want to worry those around her, but her thoughts about the fear of frostbite do not give her peace. Lost in thought, Solgren imagines warm milk and fresh-baked goods that make her smile. The fire in the fireplace flared up, creating a bright flame that filled the room with warmth. The joy and relief from the warmth instantly reflected in the atmosphere. The man sighs with relief as he hugs the girl wrapped in a soft blanket, the warmth returning, and he notices with gratitude that the temperature in the room is beginning to rise. The doctor expresses calm and looks at the device in his hands. He announces that the lady's temperature has finally returned to normal, and now she can relax. Solgren looked at the servant and maid, carefully noting their work with appreciation. He said that they had done a good job, but now he would like to hear what had happened. The maid reported that the little girl suddenly asked to go outside. She explained that she wanted to save people who had suffered as a result of the storm, feeling a duty to them. Evan and Lily stand by the bed, monitoring the girl's condition, saying that she was saved. They share a slight relief, but are ready to tell the story of what happened. The lady again expressed a desire to go outside. The servants hurried after finding the children by the lake, but soon the lady unexpectedly lost consciousness, which caused alarm. The character asks a question with caution, suspecting something strange. He does not understand how the lady found out about the children at the lake and why the weather suddenly improved dramatically. The man looks forward with a serious expression. He explains that in order to use the winter branch, one must properly handle the magic by opening the door, and this is difficult. One has to reflect on the maiden's incredible abilities, marveling at how she was able to open the door at such a young age. Belgren bows her head, regretting her mistake, and admitting her guilt for not taking good care of her mistress. She asks to accept any punishment, humbly awaiting her master's decision. The character reflects that if he had been healthy, Uriel would not have grabbed the winter branch and would not have committed such rash acts. His thoughts are full of regret and anxiety. The man asks his interlocutor, with slight anxiety about the fate of the children, that every saved his face, expressing concern. He is trying to understand the consequences of what happened. The interlocutor explains that both rescued people are in serious condition, but will soon recover. They are a brother and sister of a different race, and Kian will reveal the rest of the circumstances. The man stands thoughtfully, holding his hand, pondering the recent events. His gaze thoughtful, he remarks out loud that the rescued children seem to be purebred. Purebloods are those born with the blood of the strongest beasts, retaining their human form. They are now extremely rare, having almost disappeared from human memory. Kian looked at his interlocutor thoughtfully, asking whether Evry had known in advance that the children needed help. This strange guess did not give him any peace. The man squinting asks whether Evry could have accidentally used the power of the winter branch. The girl sleeps soundly, unaware of the conversation around her. The Duke says seriously that they can go in his hands is a letter signed by Evry, which adds tension to the air. It is not clear what could be there. He sat with the letter in his hands, but was in no hurry to open it. Fear was taking hold of him, because he was afraid that he would no longer be able to remain cool after learning the truth. Looking out the window, sitting with his back to the bed, feeling the cold calm of the room, thoughts consuming him, she did not mention that her presence was important to him. He stood with his head down, unable to find answers to the questions that tormented him, quietly uttered his friend's name, asking for advice. It was not clear what he should do now. Sitting on the bed next to Evriel, the man knew he couldn't be with her. It seemed right. And yet the question swirled in his head. Was he wrong? To hide from the Emperor, the Duke lived for several years, hiding in the shadows, and soon decided to distance himself from the girl, breaking all ties, believing that this way he could protect her. The character pensively recalls the last time he spoke of his love for her, with flowers depicted in the background, symbolizing bright and warm memories. A man in a strict black outfit looks with concern at his interlocutor, who stands with his back to him. He asks if everything is all right, and receives the answer that the sedative from the doctor really did work. The medicine the blonde man takes, although it alleviates the attacks, worsens the condition of his body, creating dangerous consequences for the whole body. The protagonist did everything possible to get rid of the symptoms, but the medicine turned out to be too strong, and now his body is shaken by convulsions, literally after every use. Rasher stood to the side, addressing the boy in front of him with respect. His words clear and calm, despite the underlying anxiety that filled the room with silence. The boy sat alone in the dark, and then lay down next to his daughter, thinking that he would stay by her side only for this day. His gaze was directed towards Evry, because now she needed his care. Lying quietly next to the girl and feeling how calm was slowly taking over his body, the man realized that even if someone called him a coward, he didn't care. The main thing was that Evry was safe. Solgren lay there, trying to cope with the impenetrable cold, her body tensing, using all her remaining strength to warm herself, and she sighed heavily in exhaustion. Evriel slowly wakes up and tries to get up, but notices a familiar face in front of her. A thought flashes through her head. This is her father, and surprise gives way to slight confusion. The beauty lies next to her father, under a soft blanket, her thoughts wandering. She feels that she has spent too much energy, but surprisingly quickly came to her senses after that. The Duke and the maiden lie side by side. Evry is lost in her memories. The day when she last saw him screaming at the door comes to her mind. The baby is truly happy and hugs her father. While he is fast asleep, she decides to enjoy the moment, snuggling up to him, because soon he may wake up, and the moment will be interrupted. Also, without getting out of bed, the lady thinks that she would like to spend more time with the one she misses so much. She doesn't have enough time together. The Duke sat up abruptly as he woke up, alarm instantly taking over his face. When he saw that Evry had woken up, his voice trembled full of relief and excitement. The man tried to convince himself and others that everything was fine, but his gaze remained tired. Remembering Evan's words, he thought about the possibility of a rise in temperature. Evri clenched her fists, holding back tears, and screamed piercingly that she was guilty. Her face was burning with excitement, and her gaze was full of sincere remorse because she did not want to ruin anything. The girl still blames herself, saying that everything that happened is her fault. She now understands why she was forbidden to use the power of the Winter Branch, realizing all its danger. Solgren sits on the bed, sincerely promising not to use the Winter Branch anymore, and assures that he will use it only in case of extreme necessity when he grows up. Evri lowers her head shyly, her gaze full of regret. Her father's voice sounds soft and soothing. Looking up, she hears that no one is going to scold her, which is even a little strange. The hero looks at her with a warm smile, his voice full of gratitude. She saved the children from the storm. Her actions gave them life, and he is grateful for her heroism. The man sat on the edge of the bed, holding the girl's hand. The daughter, worried, asked if the children were alive. Upon hearing that Evan had helped them, she breathed a sigh of relief. Solgren stands by the window, looking thoughtfully into the distance, uttering quiet words. He thinks that it would be nice to find a magic teacher for protection. Evri clenched her fist, her thoughts full of bewilderment. How was this even possible? The guy was saying that a situation might arise where she would have to defend herself. Evri hesitated, slightly agitated by the question. The man seemed to think that she didn't like the idea. The girl muttered sheepishly and quickly thanked him, afraid of appearing ungrateful. Standing in front of her father, the lady met his stern but caring gaze, reminding her that she should not hide problems when there are people nearby who are ready to help. The main character, clearly frightened by the unexpected punishment, could not hide her surprise. She was forbidden to leave the house for a week, and she had to take care of her health. The man, leaning thoughtfully on his arm, sums up their conversation, his voice calm, as he says that they will end here, as if he is closing the topic with relief. The little girl stands in front of him, her face expressing confusion and slight panic. He asks her to go back to her room, but she does not want to, because she has not seen him for so long. Suddenly falling back onto the bed, the little girl screams, clutching her leg, which has suddenly become painful. Her face filled with panic, she exclaims that she will not be able to go on, although in fact this is not true. Evri complains sheepishly that she is being rocked in the arms of the maid, who holds her with a caring smile, and Hervin asks in surprise if she doesn't like being with her. The child throws herself onto her father's bed, exclaiming that it is much more comfortable than her own, and convinced that resting here will help her recover faster, she decides to stay. Ratcher respectfully reports the visit of a stranger from Kampa. He hurries to convey the news, not knowing how it will affect further events in the house. Evri stands sighing happily against a backdrop of bright flowers, her eyes shining because Sildia has finally arrived, and this long-awaited event brings relief and joy. A girl in glasses sits at a table, thoughtfully holding a cup, her face expressing impatience, her thoughts overflowing with the question, how much longer must she wait before she is called? The interlocutor is surprised by the unexpected visit. She was not expecting a personal meeting, but only a letter. She asks if there were any problems along the way. Sildia greets her interlocutor with a bow, introducing herself as Sandfield, and wishing her a good day under the protection of the veil. Sildia sits at the table, asking why such a young girl invited her to a meeting, expressing obvious curiosity and bewilderment. The woman tensed slightly as she chose her words. She needed to convey important information before the conversation could continue. The girl could believe what she heard, thinking about what was happening. Her thoughts were full of doubts after hearing how the teacher forbade the student to take on orders. Sildia Sandfield is an enigmatic artist who became famous thanks to one painting. Her art captivated everyone with its mysterious blue hue, arousing interest. The girl looked ahead with a thoughtful gaze, wondering what kind of person that man was. He liked to drink and gamble. The Duchess looks thoughtfully at her interlocutor and asks a question about her debut, clearly pondering an important decision. The girl hesitates a little and hesitantly asks if she is suitable for this task. The blonde calmly answers that she wants to entrust this task to her. Avriel holds a cup, her voice calm, asking to paint a landscape with the blue pigment she gave her. Confidently promising to find everything necessary for the project, the little girl says that she is ready to pay any price. Her plans include opening a business and introducing a new shade to society. Sylvia firmly declares that she will do her best and asks for trust in her. In this matter, her eyes full of determination and readiness to cope with the task. The artist adjusted his glasses, thought for a moment, and quietly asked if it was possible to add one condition to the contract. His tone of voice was cautious, but there was something else burning in his eyes. A calm voice said, "Can I draw your portrait?" Her eyes gleamed with curiosity and a slight tension, as it was not a big request. The main character looked thoughtfully into the distance, remembering the past. Her portraits had already been painted in the imperial palace in her past life. It would be nice to agree. Every agrees to the offer with a smile, but softly adds that she will fulfill the request if she is helped in return. The little girl sits lost in her thoughts. Despite the joy of signing the contract, she is sad because she had to leave her father's room. The heroine sits on the sofa, worried, doubting whether he received her letter and followed her father's recommendations. Belgren, surprised, asks how they managed to make and ship the pigment, then clarifies how they know the apprentice. Kian politely asks for a few minutes to tell him the important news. The Duchess is glad to see him and invites him in. The man, with a serious expression on his face, asks Mrs. Belgren to leave them for a moment, hinting at an important conversation. The white-haired girl and her companion watch the Duke's assistant closely, one of them quietly noting that the man looks a little nervous, creating a slight tension in the air. The man speaks thoughtfully about the mixed-up documents found in the office on the day of Mr. Ross's visit, hinting at a possible connection between the events. The girl asks a question in fear, assuming that a thief has broken into the office, but she is gently objected, saying that she cannot be called a thief. The main character looks away carefully. Her thoughts are anxious. She remembers how she put the documents in their places and understands that someone is checking her reaction. The little heroine, feigning innocence, says that she does not understand what is being said, hoping to avoid suspicion, her expression completely serene. The character holds up the hair he found and says accusingly, "Now you're going to continue denying your involvement?" She presses her lips together, smiling nervously, and the thought flashes through her head that she should have pulled out all her hair to avoid getting caught. The conversation between the two about how smart their mistress is respectful. She even understands chess terms like gambit, which is strange because there is no chess set in the room. The knight thoughtfully recalls how strangely she behaved. She rushed to the window and suddenly ran to save the victims. Rasher looks closely suspiciously, noticing that the order to expand the search was clearly not random, and asks for details. The man ordered to tell everything, starting with what happened with the finances and their lands, as well as about the governess. The most important thing is how the little girl found out where these children would be, and also why she invited an unknown artist. The beauty might just cry, but Sylvia won't start a business without her, and so it won't be possible to disown her. Kian is the one who controls everything in this estate. The lands can only be restored with his help. The heroine is determined to try to gain support. Her gaze is full of confidence. She is about to ask somethings. The beauty smiles cheerfully, speaking sarcastically about where the money received in advance was spent. We are talking about the salary. Kian listens. It seems the little one found some documents about salary payments. Virgo sits on the floor with a book in her hands. She notices that she often receives payment in advance. The heroine thought that the guy's hard work was poorly paid, but he receives a significant amount, even too much. The girl, with a thoughtful look, smiles knowingly, wondering if she can guess the reason for Rasher's actions. When the knights first came to the Duchess, they called Kian Lord, which seemed strange since he had no title. It is clear that the knights belong to a different race. Perhaps Rasher buys people from other clans. Kian, with a slight smile, tells the heroine that she has changed, confirming the purchase of friends from the market with the money he received. The heroine looks into the distance, thinking about how the man spends his money on helping others, which surprises her. Young Solgren announces her proposal with a smile, and the young man asks with interest what exactly is he wants to know. The girl smiles slyly, offering to earn more money, confidently, declaring that she can solve the problem of debt to Ross. The heroine makes a gesture with 2 fingers, confidently listing the conditions. No questions asked, and keeping it a secret from her father. Rasher sits calmly explaining that his new duty is to be the Duke's secret assistant, but insists on keeping the deal quiet. Avriel doubts whether Kian will accept her offer, but the boy calmly agrees, stating that he accepts her conditions. Kian understands that if he can't stop the mistress, it's best to stay close and monitor her actions, anticipating potential problems. The hero warns that if asked directly, he'll have to answer all the questions. The girl, smiling, agrees easily, as if it were no problem. The hero says that he is leaving, having advised her to think in advance what to answer Mrs. Belgren. The maiden sitting on the floor energetically agrees, confirming his words. The guy standing in front of the Duchess asks a direct question, wondering what she would do if he refused. The girl looks up at him in surprise, listening attentively. Rasher says with a serious look that he could report everything to the Duke. The girl smiles and slightly coquettishly asks if she would threaten him in that case. The servant, with a slight smile on his face, reveals the truth. The hair he found was just bait to lure the beauty out. With a serious expression on her face, the girl demands answers, placing her hands on her hips, her voice determined. The blonde excitedly presses her hand to her face. Remembering that the Winter Branch told her about this, she used the name. The maid explains to her charge that the artifact is part of the ancient spirit of winter, which surprises her. The girl admits that she named the branch Mrs. Butterfly because she couldn't use her real name to avoid giving her away. The beauty, confused, asks for an explanation again, admitting that she did not understand what was being discussed. Avriel admits with a slight smile that he speaks in such a way on purpose so that no one understands anything. A little girl asks in surprise if she can talk to the spirit called Butterfly. The heroine thought for a moment, admitting that she didn't know the answer. Her thoughts returning to her father's illness, which she was thinking about. The girl turns to Mrs. Butterfly with excitement, hoping to get an answer to her question, which disappeared into thin air. Sir Alan asks with slight surprise what happened when he heard a sound at the door he came to. The kitten sits comfortably on the lap, making meowing sounds, causing affection in those around him. It was brought by a knight. The baby runs down the hallway, obviously cold, trying to find somewhere warm, while people talk about something else. The girl explains with a smile that they got the cat because of a mouse infestation, because she herself was scared of a mouse and needed help. Dark memories came flooding back, as the main character sat in the closet where she had once been locked with a dead mouse. The baby cried and knocked on the door all night, but it was only in the morning that the maid discovered her. The Duchess recalls how she became a substitute for the Empress's deceased daughters, receiving all her attention. When the Queen rejected the Crown Prince, he began to torment her, and this was shown in a look full of hatred. The maid leans towards her mistress, in surprise, noticing how she was looking thoughtfully at the cat. She obviously liked him. The girl gently strokes the animal, saying with a soft smile that he's very affectionate and trusting, and that he suits her that way. Solgren smiles, holding the kitten in her arms. She says kindly, "My name is Avriel, and you?" The blonde looks at the kitten and notices that he doesn't have a tag. She thinks that he hasn't been given a name yet. A girl with white hair holds a kitten in her arms, and with a soft smile says that she is glad to meet him, calling him Ruby, after which he lights up scarlet. Mr. Rasher greets Mrs. Belgreen politely. They exchange formal words. She carries milk. The man asks in surprise about the kitten, and Lily reminds him of its purpose, catching mice, and that he got it himself. Belgren turns his head and wonders thoughtfully where this cat came from. When Uriel gave the kitten a name, it suddenly began to glow, showing that it was no ordinary animal. The girl looks at the kitten, feeling an unusual connection, something similar to what she had with Winterbranch. The beauty is confused, not believing that she was able to make a contract with the spirit so easily. The main character recounts with surprise how the cat lit up and flew after receiving a name. The conversation about spirits continues. The blonde reminds that she already has a spirit named Butterfly. The girl looked thoughtfully at the cat. The Winter Branch did not answer her call, and now she needed to find out more about what was happening. Solgren wondered if there were any books about spirits, and her hunch led her to the Winter Library. The Duchess tugs doubtfully at the man's sleeve, insisting that he did not act of his own free will. The knight explains that they were not there that day because they were fighting demons. The girl, looking thoughtful, says that she heard about Jed's punishment, but rules are rules. The knight says, with a slight smile, that he is glad, as he was worried that the girl did not like the brunette. They laugh while discussing their arguments with the guy. The girl clarifies that she does not hate him. The Solgren's mansion has a winter and summer library, but since winter makes up more than half the year, the winter one is used more often. The blonde had never been to any such place before, so she was very surprised. The baby, of course, almost spoke out. No one knows about her reincarnation in this life. She behaves differently. Opening the huge door to enter the luxurious hall, Belgren assures that the child will like everything. Since the librarian is not around, the woman asks to look around while she goes to look for him. Addressing the kitten, Solgren asks if this is his first time here, and it turns out that it is. The girl's mother liked this place. The Duchess constantly used this library. The woman often sat on the southern side, most often on the windowsill, basking in the sun's rays. Avriel stands lost in thoughts about her mother. Belgren told her about what the girl was interested in. The little girl looks at the sofa, lost in memories of how she used to sometimes fall asleep on it. Avriel looks at the sleeping girl with ash-blonde hair, and a thought occurs to her. Could this really be Sister Asiligo? The knight coldly demands that she show respect to the Duchess. The girl calls out to him in despair, but he doesn't hear. The boy looks on in confusion as his hand suddenly touches hers, and he asks in fear what is happening, not understanding her actions. The girl asks in surprise if she got too carried away, grabbing the stranger's hands, and sheepishly apologizes. Asiligo stands there awkwardly, and Lily with a smile suggests that he address her informally. Belgren introduces Asiligo and his sister Kana. The girl watches with interest, holding tightly to her brother. Blue Eyes explains that the children will live at the estate until they recover while they live in the guest house. Evry stands with a kitten on her shoulder. She is the only daughter of Duke Solgren who saved them that day. The beauty anxiously justifies herself asking for forgiveness. She blames herself for her harsh behavior with the children who almost died. Smiling, the girl agrees that it is time to return. Lily calmly replies, "Yes, madam." The boy stands with his eyes downcast and quietly speaks words of gratitude that are sincere. Lost in thought, the heroine recalls how in this life, Asiligo did not speak to her so quickly for the first time, which is strange. Then the man suddenly asked a question that interrupted her thoughts, but unfortunately, it was still unclear why it happened. She stood there stunned by his question, not knowing what to answer, but something inside her changed. Kana looked at the Duchess with delight, admiring her beauty, as if she saw a living doll. She was glad that she met such a person. Asiligo gently stroked his sister's head, warning her against judging people by their appearance. The boy froze when he heard the girl's question about the Duchess's beauty. He clearly didn't know how to answer. The future knight thought about the Duchess. The little girl was clearly different from all the aristocrats he had met. The gray-haired man clenched his teeth, thinking he couldn't allow himself to trust just because of the kindness shown. She lay on her stomach, thinking about what she had read and listed. Out loud, the terms of the contract written on the pieces of paper. There are only 3 important things that need to be done to reach the conclusion. The little girl lay there smiling, realizing that she had fulfilled all the terms of the contract without even realizing it. The maid suggested telling the Duke the news. He would surely be delighted when he found out everything. A girl in a bright dress cheerfully agrees to go to her father, and Lily, who is also getting ready to go, there watches hers. Belgren is confused as she notices the upset girl, who realized that the news did not impress her. It makes me sad because it's clear that even good news can't soften someone's heart. Solgren shouts in rage that he will no longer obey his father, expressing his protest. The maid suggests coming back and trying to talk to him tomorrow, reassuring the girl. Sildia proudly informs the woman that she has finished her painting, waiting for a reaction. The heroine proudly called her painting Solgren's Dawn. She thought that this title would be appropriate. The girl with shining eyes joyfully declares that her friend's painting will become a world masterpiece. It was enough just to see it. The heroine asks Lily to convey an important message to Kienu, saying that she has urgent business with him. A friend of the teacher Sandfield reports that the painting was hung in the Riviera, standing in a relaxed pose, discussing the details. The man exclaims in irritation that the woman disappeared so that the paintings could be put on display. The hero is clearly outraged that the painting was hung without the teacher's permission. This is unforgivable. An irritated man pushing his way through the crowd shouts for everyone to move away. He is worried about what kind of landscape they are looking at. The soft blue color and the beautiful castle clearly go together. It's strange that it's so beautiful. The man with the letter smiles, thinking that as the lady had expected, everyone is interested in paint. Solgren's Dawn has created a sensation and will be shown in Kampa. It's time to move forward. The character is pleased to report that the painting has become famous and that the paint can now be sold. The girl happily offers to come up with a name for the ink, emphasizing the importance of the symbolic word. A friend suggests that Sandfield come up with a name for the paint herself, and she asks in surprise if she can. The woman reminds that without her painting, the paint would not be noticed, so she must give it a name. In her mind, the beauty thinks that the name will again become Phantom Blue because it suits her. The words come out on their own, Fairy Tale Blue. This time it's something different. Kian smiles. The name is strategically appropriate, so there is no argument. All that's left is to choose a store location, but the little one doesn't have enough budget to open one. Lily is surprised and cautiously asks how her interlocutor could have learned about this fact. The little girl happily recalls that she learned this information in a past life. The girl speaks sadly about her parents, who run a small workshop in Kampa. The Duchess is surprised and asks why she wasn't told about this before, and the answer even confuses her a little. The man calmly says that the plan is still being developed, and that is the end of the conversation. Kian thought thoughtfully that his master was always dissatisfied, whether his daughter came or not. The hero read the letter, thinking that she always came, but recently began to avoid him. They discussed her disappearance. One said that she spends a lot of time in her room, so everything is fine. The guy asks something, but it seems nothing can be heard. He bows his head in a gesture. Kian stared thoughtfully into the distance, as he was informed that the jurisdiction was demanding an explanation for the weakening of the frost. He stared away, thinking about how he was using his illness to stall for time, knowing that the silence couldn't go on forever. It seems the easing of the cold has attracted more visitors to their lands. It is only a matter of time before Every becomes the center of attention. Everything has already reached the Emperor, because he always watches the family more than anyone else. The pale man can barely contain himself and asks Kian to spread the rumor that he is dying. Hervin is panicking, his gaze full of tension. He is sure that he must appear weak, only then will he be able to protect his daughter. The guy tilted his head thoughtfully. He orders to quickly spread the rumors, it will help. The protagonist closed his eyes with a heavy sigh, thinking about his fate. Of course, Solgren knows that he does not have long left. Spring arrives with an uninvited guest, giving rise to a slight premonition of impending change. Ross arrived to ask for the money back, and as usual, he didn't look too friendly. It becomes clear that the Duke has no intention of repaying the debt, because Kian, standing nearby, is smiling.